Hey there, and welcome to a very spooky edition of the Vassals of Kingsgrave. In this episode of the podcast, we thought we might celebrate Halloween by talking about some of our favorite horror movies. My name is Duncan, or Valkyrist on the forums, and today I am joined by...
Hi there, my name is Glenn. I'm Dagger Strippers from the forums.
Hey, this is Zach, also known as Alias on the forums.
Hi, this is Greg, Claudius the Fool on the forums.
Hi, this is Thomas. I'm FT Ward on the forums.
Yeah, I'm Barrick on the forums. Hi, everyone.
Happy Halloween, guys. It's not actually Halloween at the time of the recording, but it should be by the time the episode goes up, unless something goes terribly wrong and we're all murdered.
As we all know in all horror films, nothing goes wrong ever.
Yes, the Skype call was coming from inside the building. But I was wondering, Halloween's never really been a big thing in Australia, but I know it's big in other parts of the world, like America, obviously. Do any of you guys celebrate Halloween, or did you when you were younger?
Well, I used to dress up when I think in 2008 still, I would go out after The Dark Knight came out, I would dress up as the Joker and stuff, but I wouldn't, actually go trigger. I mean, I wouldn't go
just sit
I
at
would
home.
go to Halloween parties like with friends at university and stuff. But other than that, I mean, it's not like a big tradition. We generally, I mean, I remember at least when I was younger, we had we did use pumpkins and stuff to decorate and so on. But after a while, it just we just didn't do it anymore. And so it's sort of more something that I look at from outside. Look, as an observant, so to speak, like English and American traditions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, same. I would always see it in movies, and I'd be so annoyed that we didn't have it because it seemed really fun, dress up as scary creatures and go get candy. But I think part of the problem is in Australia, it's almost summer, so it's light until 8 o'clock, which kind of hurts the scary vibe. But Greg, what about you?
Oh yeah, we always celebrated as a kid. But where I work, my town has this major Halloween festival every year where there's a parade, and then all the businesses have they close down for an hour, and all the kids come through town, and you give out candy to them. So it's sort of like you're forced to do it, but it's a lot of fun. But growing up, my dad and my grandfather loved it. My grandfather used to dress up as a stuffed a hayman and with a pumpkin head and sit out on the front porch and scare the shit out of kids when they went by. And he did that up until he's about 70, 78 years old. But he got a kick out of it. But I just hate being scared, and I would rather just dress up as a character or a soldier or something. But
severe or something, yeah. Anyone else, Zach?
I did celebrate Halloween. I wouldn't say I was the biggest fan of it, nor was my family. I mean, we weren't super into it, but I did definitely do the whole thing where you dress up, go around and get the candy. And it was a lot of fun for a long time. And I didn't really dress up as anything scary either, mostly just Pirate or Darth Vader were pretty much the options I had most of the time. And then when I got older, I went to a high school and middle school that I had to wear a uniform, so I used it as an excuse to not wear that by doing very half-assed costumes. So that was the evolution of my Halloween experience. I wish I was still doing kind of fun Halloween stuff. I haven't really done anything in a while, so that would be nice to get back into that.
Yeah, I guess I'm a myopic American, and it never really occurred to me that other countries didn't celebrate Halloween like we do. I guess that's news to me. But I grew up Catholic, so we November 1st is All Saints Day, so we always had November 1st off. So that made Halloween super fun because you could stay out super late and do stuff. And I guess we always did celebrate with, go out with my friends and just kind of raise hell. And then come back and just trade candy back and forth with, just put your sack out on the table and trade. So I have pretty fond memories of Halloween.
Does that seem like a strange custom from the outside looking in, just going to strangers' houses and asking for candy?
It sounds awesome. Whenever I would see that on TV or movies where they get home and they dump all their candy out on the ground, I'm like, why is this not a thing here?
Oh, so you don't have it at all? It's just not not a thing that you guys don't do? It's
doesn't
not
happen.
a thing.
No. Occasionally kids might try and do it, but it's
I feel like we should go to Australia and make $1 million because it's huge business in America. I know that.
Yeah. I'll carve a pumpkin and put it outside my house maybe if I have time. If pumpkins are in season now, I don't know. Anyway, Glenn, what about you?
Pumpkins to Australia.
You invested in pumpkins like Homer Simpson, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's coming back around February.
It does seem to be dying down over here in the UK. Back when I was younger, I think I did it up until when I entered high school. That was around the age of 12. That seemed to be the acceptable time to stop doing it, or when it was no longer acceptable to keep trick-or-treating. I just had standard costumes like ghost costumes. Once I was a vampire, I think. I did once try I did want to go with Michael Myers this one year, but the mask was like expensive. It was like £20. So my parents said, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, I was reading a bit on Wikipedia, which, as we know, is never wrong. And apparently, Halloween has kind of pagan roots or something. Is that right? And it was originally a day for remembering the dead.
It was
That's right.
the holiday of Samhain, I believe.
Samhain, okay, yeah. And it was about like using humor and ridicule to like confront the dead. And typical Halloween activities include trick-or-treating, attending costume parties, decorating, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires, apple bobbing, visiting haunted house attractions, playing pranks, telling scary stories, and watching horror films. So we will be doing one of those activities in this podcast.
Wait, we're not bobbing for apples?
We'll see.
I want to bob for some apples.
Got to fill the tank up.
Gross.
Yeah, it's not what all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, well, apples aren't even. Yeah, anyway. But I thought as way of a preamble, maybe we could talk a bit about just the horror genre in general, and maybe, are you a fan of it? And also what you see as the attraction or the appeal of horror movies, because it's always fascinated me that so many people would enjoy feeling scared.
It's funny because I really do not enjoy horror movies that much. I would say that in terms of my movie watching, I don't know, canon, kind of the capacity of movies I've watched, they probably make up a very small percentage. I just don't find myself very interested in watching them that much, and part of it is me not liking being scared. I don't like that feeling. I don't like the positive aspects people often cite of, like an adrenaline rush or just getting really into it, but it usually doesn't do it for me. And it's not that I'm terribly scared by the movies. I'm pretty good about it most of the time, but I just don't enjoy it so much. But I find some movies like 28 Days Later, which I will be representing, I guess, just great films and great to watch. So there are a few that do cross my path that I do enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the best horror films usually blend a few genres, like crime drama or
Right.
sort of action or thriller or whatever.
Well, I have always been a fan of horror movies, but they do seem to have a bad rep within, I guess, the film industry these days, that the horror movies of late haven't been as good. I guess the last horror movie that I have enjoyed was Drag Me to Hell back in 2009. But I did enjoy the Halloween series. I was obsessed with that. I did enjoy Nightmare on Elm Street. Those are movies that I've grown up with, so maybe I enjoy them more because, I've watched them countless times. Yeah, I guess the appeal to them would be, the jump scares. Some of the movies I enjoy the suspense of them.
I kind of like the fact that most of them aren't that great. I don't know, they do get that bad rap, but my coping mechanism for watching horror movies is to make fun of them. That's what I do. Like, that's how I get through the scare, and I enjoy that very much. That's the part that I like about them most of the time.
Well, as you mentioned, a lot of people like the adrenaline rush, the feeling of danger without the threat of danger, because your body, it kind of has like a natural response to danger. Your brain is like flooded with sort of chemicals that give you this kind of rush, this high, makes you feel energized, and after the danger is gone, you feel this tremendous relief rather, as all your muscles kind of relax. It's cool.
Initially, when I was a kid, I didn't like watching horror films, so I didn't watch any. And I came to the genre actually fairly late, around when I was like 18 or something. And I started probably watching The Exorcist and The Shining, which are sort of like, the big ones that everyone feels kind of scared by it. But I find that now that when I watch them, I'm not really scared by them anymore. It's more like anticipation. It's like exciting to watch them because there's going to be a big scene that's going to be very, very impressive. It's kind of difficult to say what is a horror film because I keep telling my mother, Silence of the Lambs is considered by some to be a horror film, but she says nah, it's actually more of a thriller because it involves serial killers and police and all that stuff. So she doesn't consider it a horror film. But for people who actually want to see a horror film and get some awards and stuff, it's probably very important that it is a horror film or something. But to me, the attraction seems to be that this is sort of like the sort of extreme or something. It's like daring yourself to watch something that is probably going to surprise you in unexpected ways. And so I guess, I can see the appeal. And now I'm actually looking for horror films.
Well, I mean, for many
Yeah.
people, like teenagers, that is the sort of appeal. It's this kind of endurance test to go and sort of sit through it without sort of covering your eyes. It's like looking at something scary. It's like a roller coaster, like a haunted house. But it is interesting that a lot of people distance horror movies from the idea of a quality film. They say, no, it's more of a thriller. It's more of an action movie. They don't. The idea of horror has sort of these negative connotations. But in a way, in terms of filmmaking, it does require a lot of kind of skill in terms of capturing the audience's attention and drip feeding them fear and sort of eliciting a physical response is kind of really impressive when you think about it. And it is much harder to scare people as people become used to the cliches and the tropes and expecting the jump scares. It is much harder and harder to scare people.
I would just say I don't think a jump scare necessarily requires any skill from the filmmaker, but I like suspense and horror elements in a lot of movies that I don't think are generally considered horror movies. Like something like Apocalypse Now has large kind of surreal horror. It wouldn't be considered a horror movie, but I feel like there is there's horror in there. And so I like, it's a tough genre to kind of categorize what exactly it is. But I mean, like a straight slasher film or something generally doesn't have any interest to me. But the horror and suspense elements in a lot of movies, I think, as you say, require quite a bit of good filmmaking and are very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, suspense, that was kind of Hitchcock's bread and butter. That was something he was really interested in exploring.
Yeah, I guess horror films can also be probably used to sort of address existential fears and sort of high concepts as well, because it's like, I mean, for example, if you look at the Alien franchise, it's you could say it's about humanity and it's about childbirth and probably also because of the violating act of the creature, it's probably also partly about rape and all that stuff. You can address many different kinds of issues that people don't generally like to talk about, but because horror films are meant to sort of deal in extremes, it's sort of probably more acceptable to address them in this genre more specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely great at evoking those kind of primal fears about death and things like that. The uncanny, the unknown, the supernatural, those are very much part of us, but we never really explore them. We just kind of keep them tucked away and don't think about them. And horror movies definitely kind of pull that out.
I don't like being scared. I just startle very easily ever since I was very little. And I don't want, if that's the only thing going for it, I'm not going to see it. But some of my favorite horror movies are movies, like Event Horizon or like Ravenous, that they're also something else. It's also a Western. It's also a space opera. There's other stuff going on.
Yeah.
And even movies like Dawn of the Dead, I watched the original Dawn of the Dead way too young, scared the crap out of me. And then by the time I watched it, I think it was the 2004 version, I was like ready for it, and I enjoyed it for what it was. And it's actually one of my favorite like campy movies to watch, but I don't consider it a serious movie. But yeah, I like them that have other stuff going on.
I have the original home, but I haven't watched it yet, so don't spoil it for me, please.
I was so young that I literally remember flashes, and I remember driving home and not wanting to look out the window because the trees were scaring me. Like I didn't want to look out a dark window because it's in like a cemetery and stuff. And yeah. But,
that's an interesting question. Does anyone have any traumatic early horror movie things that define their I don't know, feelings on the genre or anything like that?
Well, I guess if I had to pick something, I would say that the cross scene in The Exorcist was fairly shocking. I mean, when I saw it the first time, like when she's hurting herself in the room, and yeah, that sort of thing you don't expect necessarily because it's not something that you're used to seeing. So it's about desensitizing, and that's why I listened to this one film critic from the UK, Mark Kermode, who is a big horror buff. And what he says, these films like Paranormal and, The Conjuring to a certain extent and all that sort of thing is cattle prod cinema, where it's like quiet, bang, and then you have quiet, all, it's like you're sort of hitting the audience once in a while with something, but most of the time it's nothing special actually. And that's why I think, old-fashioned horror movies are still worth, checking out.
It's a totally different experience to watch a horror movie by yourself and with an audience. So I think it is a very communal thing where you're kind of building on everyone's fears, whereas if you're kind of just watching by yourself, I guess you can get freaked out, but it's kind of a drier experience for me, at least.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons why I have not watched too many horror films is because I think that they do really belong in that communal setting, and it's just not something I've encountered nearly as much in my movie watching experience. So, yeah, I just don't feel the urge to watch them so much when I'm alone. But the problem with that is that when I'm communally watching a horror movie, like I say, I'm a terrible person to be watching them with because I feel the need to say something about everything. Like I'm that guy.
It's your defense mechanism.
Right. Something else I'd be curious to know if people want to share is what is the thing that the horror movie trope or like the horror trope that really gets you personally? For me, it's ventriloquist dummies. I hate those so much.
That's a pretty good one.
Oh, to me, it would probably be something more like bodily transformation, something like The Thing, which I find is really, because you don't know what when you don't know what the change actually is supposed to mean and what it leads to and so on. It's like it's beyond the control of the character that's being changed to some extent, which is why I took The Fly for this one.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you don't know what the thing is, you can't figure out the shape of it. You've never seen it before, and The Thing is a great example. That's like a horrifying movie. Just the way the animals and humans are twisted into something else, and it's so creepy to see the human form just sort of eviscerated like that and reformed into new creatures.
Actually, the scene with the dogs in the den basically is actually it's also a great scene. That's really really showcases special effects, which is also something that I find horror films are really good at. They're good at exploring the extent of visual effects. At least they used to when they're not full of CG and all that stuff. I think it's a good medium to explore what you can do in terms of makeup and in terms of visual style and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think practical effects really help the older horror movies because the actors are actually kind of seeing what we're seeing. It's not like it's just a green screen or just a tennis ball on the end of a stick or something that they have to act against. That they're really, those old school practical effects are definitely something that I prefer.
Yeah, for me, anything with bugs, I'm terrified of bugs in real life, but like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when she turns her hand over and she's got that huge cricket-like thing in her hand, it goes right through me. And any movies that are just being gross with like insects and stuff just for the heck of it, like if it's a skull and a snake crawls out of the mouth or something like that, it just it goes right through me. And one of the cheesiest movies I've ever seen is Them. I don't know if you've ever seen Them. It's from like the 50s about giant radioactive ants, and it's so cheesy, but even them, they still just went right through me. And I was like, I can't. Sorry.
Yeah, gigantic insects.
But I would suggest that you not watch like the William Friedkin movie Bugs, which is like really...
I wouldn't watch a movie if the title of it was Bugs.
Yeah, that seems like a...
Probably not.
I did see Arachnophobia, and Arachnophobia for some reason didn't bother me so much. I don't know why, just because there were so many of them. It wasn't like a shock moment. But after the 20th spider, I was like, okay, I get what they're doing. But yeah, I will not click on Bugs.
You just get used to them.
The Mummy from the 1990s, there's the scene with the
scarabs under the skin. Yeah, but I still like that because I have a weakness for them. It's funny, like my mom loves those movies. They're her favorite. Anytime she's like, "Ooh, that Brendan Fraser movie's on," and I just sit and watch that. I have a nostalgic feel for those movies, and I did enjoy them because they're also adventure, high Indiana Jones type movies also.
Yeah, I guess that scene from Wrath of Khan where they put the wig down the guy's ear. I don't know if you guys have seen that, the old school one.
Oh, that one. Oh, yeah.
It crawls in and attaches itself to his brain. I mean, that to me is horrific.
My headphones off my head with that. And now I feel like I'm in the minority. I thought everyone was freaked out by bugs, but like I don't know how you don't crash a car when a spider falls on your face.
It's like I'm freaked out by ticks if they are, because they're so small, but because they bury like their head in your arm or something like that, in your leg, and they suck your blood and something. It's like you have something that's a foreign body, stuck inside you and stuff like that, which is that's what really would make me freak out about bugs and all that stuff.
But well, I guess I do enjoy if it's an unstoppable force in the movie, like a serial killer, like Michael Myers, or even this applies to the Terminator films. I think that's one of my favourite aspects of horror movies. And you know, if you enjoy the movie, you're guaranteed that there's going to be more because they can't be stopped. So you know they're coming back in a sequel.
Cool. Okay, so basically, for the main discussion, each host is going to present their favorite horror movie to the group. Since we have so many hosts this episode, I thought it might be helpful to go by order of release date. So I guess starting in the mid-70s, Thomas, would you like to tell us about The Omen?
Sure. I'll just kind of give a brief, as brief as I can, plot, I guess, summary. But the film opens in Rome, June 6th, 6 a.m., 666. With Robert Thorne, played by Gregory Peck. He's driving or being driven to a hospital where his wife, Kathy, who's played by Lee Remick, has just gone into labor. And when he gets to the hospital, he's met by a priest. It's a Catholic hospital in Rome that tells him that his son died shortly after being born. And the priest then presents Robert Thorne with a deal whereby another child was born that same morning in the hospital and his mother died, that Robert Thorne could adopt that child and present it to his wife Kathy without telling her, because Thorne is very concerned about Kathy's kind of sanity. She very much wanted this child, and he believes that she would be just destroyed if she knew that she lost the child. So Thorne kind of reluctantly accepts the deal and takes the child, and they raise him as their own, name him Damien. And we just kind of jump forward a few years where Thorne is appointed to be the ambassador to Great Britain by the president, who is his close personal friend, his college roommate. And the Thornes move to England. They get a giant mansion outside of London, which I don't think is accurate. I think the ambassador probably has a residence, but they get a mansion outside of London, and we kind of just do a quick kind of montage of their kind of idyllic life in London, in England, until it begins with Damien's 5th birthday party, where at Damien's 5th birthday party, kind of a series of tragedies and ominous kind of warnings and portents kind of descend down on the Thorne family, and eventually the Thornes kind of start to go insane, and by the end of the movie, Robert Thorne is moved to he's kind of on his own personal journey into hell, where he is kind of convinced that his son is the Antichrist, and he attempts to murder his child in the final act. And I guess I'm skipping over the details, but that's the basic plot summary.
I like this film a lot because it has a great score, like one of the best horror film scores I think that I've ever listened to. I believe that it was created sort of as a like a Hail Mary, just like evil.
Correct.
But
It's kind of like a dark mass. It's the Academy Award-winning score for that year, and I think it was highly influential on kind of horror movies after that. Certainly, kind of supernatural horror movies after that. But it's kind of mirroring a dark mass with Gregorian chants in Latin and stuff, and it's highly effective.
Yeah, well, I think what's great about The Omen, and this was the first time I watched it a couple of days ago, and I really enjoyed it, is the idea that it could have been sort of a trashy, pulpy kind of film, but there's a few elements that really elevate it. Like the music, as you say, really brings it up to a kind of artful level. And Gregory Peck is also really great. I mean, this is a highly respected sort of older actor, and I think he adds a lot of sort of weight and dignity to the film, which could have otherwise been very sort of exploitation.
It's like Captain Ahab versus the devil. It's so it's awesome. But
well, for me, I would just say for me, it's Atticus Finch, who is kind of the quintessential American father, kind of driven mad to the point where he is murdering his own son. And for me, that's extremely powerful. And and that you're, as the audience member, you're rooting for him to kill this son, this 5-year-old boy who, if you watch the movie, doesn't do anything that a 5-year-old boy doesn't do.
I think we would. I mean, in the film, we're at least meant to believe that the nanny is still responsible in influencing the boy and so on. So I guess she does all the dirty work, and we're sort of meant to root against her. And so I guess Damien as a character is not really much in the foreground as much, I think. It's difficult with child actors as well, right? I think for what he's being asked to do, is he's actually really good. Like when he's scared of entering the church, for instance, and all that stuff. That's actually really interesting how it's being played. Because it draws on Christian mythology, like the devil can't enter the church and all that stuff. And that's really interesting.
And that scene, the music is incredible in that scene as well. How it builds to that. It just could be a little kid that doesn't want to sit through church, but everything is so portentous and everything is so subjectively kind of played up that I think it's a nearly perfect film for me.
I agree. There's a real sort of ambiguity in terms of what's actually happening. It's like the sort of supernatural elements aren't really in your face. There's no demons, there's no witches, there's no ghosts, there's no
I would argue
levitation.
there aren't actually any supernatural elements.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could almost explain everything by freak accident. And I think that sort of dedication to skepticism
except for
makes the sort of shocking moments that much more shocking. And there's always this creeping doubt that Thorne could just be deranged and he's killing an innocent child, which itself is scary. It's more about
I think it's
family
essential that it takes itself seriously, that it doesn't ever kind of go. And I think the original script, from my understanding, did have kind of demons and cloven hoofs and stuff like that. But I think that it's essential for it working, at least this movie working, that it takes itself very real and it doesn't treat anything as unserious. It's all deadly serious about itself, and I could see that turning people off, but I think to make this particular movie work, that's absolutely essential.
This is another one of those tropes that really gets me, is the whole possession of a child sort of thing that's going on. I don't know. I just have a soft spot for kids in movies as long as they don't talk that much. So it's definitely.
I don't think Damien spoke 3 words in this movie, right?
Yeah, Damien doesn't, except "Don't kill me, Daddy." But Damien really is not, I don't think, ever aware. He's not possessed in the Exorcist kind of way. He's not aware that he is. Right. He is the devil, really. It's just the people, kind of the apostates working behind the scenes, like his nanny and the priest and stuff that are kind of moving him.
Until that last scene where he smiles at the camera in
Yeah.
that sort of way.
Yeah,
Because
but
right up to that point, you could have believed that he didn't know what was going on, but I didn't like that whole almost breaking the fourth wall thing there.
Well,
But
that was never supposed to happen, really.
I kind of wish it didn't happen, because it would have been much better if you just see him holding hands with the president. That would have been much.
Yeah.
more
Well,
without
originally
his
he was
smile.
supposed to actually die. It was supposed to be three coffins at the funeral,
Oh.
and Fox, of course, wanted sequels immediately. So they're like, "You kind of need to reshoot this for us." So they shot it with Damien with the president, and Donner says that he told the actor, "Whatever you do, do not laugh," and it's a little kid, so you can kind of see on his face he's trying to hold it together when he turns to the camera, and then he just cracks that smile again, which is just a 5-year-old boy smiling, but in the context, it's so evil.
With the music.
Yeah.
Such a kind of a fuck you, fourth wall thing.
I win. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
and the deaths in the film are actually pretty well done, right? It's like, people still ask me, how did that happen with the head and all that, and the glass window and all that.
It's all kind of set piece practical effects, and again, I think it's kind of been ripped off and much worse since then. Those are influential as well, but yeah, there's not a lot of blood, there's not a lot of gore. I mean, the decapitation thing is, there's no blood at all, really, and that they timed it. If you listen to Donner talk, he kind of extended that scene. So he said generally people cover their eyes for like 2.5 seconds. So he made sure that decapitation scene lasted a good 3.5 seconds, so that when people uncovered their eyes and looked up, they'd still see that head kind of bouncing and
spinning in the air. That's sadistic. Um,
Yeah.
but the first death is chilling. The moment where
Yeah.
the nanny, and it's chilling because nothing horrifying has happened up until that point. It seems like a very measured film, and then out of nowhere, this nanny joyfully and willfully hangs herself at a birthday
Yeah.
party attended by young children,
Yeah.
and the hanging and also the children's faces just staring blankly and just absorbing the horror is equally sort of confronting.
One of my favourite parts about the movie is when the new nanny governess, so that would be Mrs. Bellot, and she just shows up and she's saying, this is my new job," and it just made me think, oh, if only that would work for me. And I'm trying to get into the IT business again, and maybe I should just show up at companies and say, "Oh, I'm here for the software engineer post or the software developer post," and take over the job.
It worked for George in Seinfeld. That's basically what he did for an entire season. Let's find you an office.
Yeah, and
Also,
starting with that
yeah.
scene, it becomes, it's a lot of different things, but part of it is kind of a haunted house movie at that point, where their own house kind of becomes against them, with Mrs. Blaylock showing up, and that really plays out kind of in the final act. But it's all like I said, everything in context just kind of builds on itself.
Yeah, well, speaking of the house, it's a lot like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby in terms of the house, the family home, this safe place being invaded. They're not really fighting an external enemy. The enemy has sort of wormed its way in and possessed one of their own, an innocent, and turned it against them, and that's kind of what's hurt the family. And there did seem to be a sort of resurgence of this sort of Old Testament fire and brimstone Catholic guilt
Absolutely.
in terms of movies in the 70s. And I'm wondering if it's kind of, I don't know, like a reaction to the 60s maybe in terms of this liberation, sexual liberation and things like that.
It's fear of children, basically, right? It's
Absolutely.
Or fear of-
is much smarter and much more dangerous than the adults, and the adults don't know how to keep it under control and all that thing.
Sure.
Probably plays into those ideas, so that the old people can sort of say, yeah, we sort of we were right. Kids are dangerous. Get off of my lawn. And,
It also plays on, it's one of the reasons I feel like I don't actually have children is this movie, but it plays on the fear of not just raising a child that could be, Adolf Hitler or Jeffrey Dahmer, but just raising a child that you don't like or love. And that to me is very powerful fear that this movie's kind of is instilled in me from a young age. I'm curious if I'm the only one, I'm guessing, that was old enough that remembers when this movie came out. Is that true or not?
yeah, it came out way before my time. So
Yeah. So it was a big deal in 1976 and 1977 when it came out, and it was a cultural phenomena, and it did have an impact on. I didn't see it till I guess maybe 5 or so years after it came out on cable, but it was something that was very, very much in the air in 1976, and it was a huge success. And Fox actually used some of the proceeds from this movie to finish Star Wars, which had kind of, the studio was kind of bogged down in financial trouble at the time. So without the
I like
Omen,
this movie way more now.
I don't know if we would have ever gotten the Star Wars that we got, because Fox was in serious trouble.
Well, I will say it was strange seeing Gregory Peck in a sort of new Hollywood film in color. I've only known him from stuff like To Kill a Mockingbird. It was weird seeing him around sort of modern actors, but he did really well. I liked him.
Yeah. But he got 10% of the gross of this movie, which ended up being like $6 million, which I kind of, as much as I could figure out, looks to be like about 35 to 50 million in modern kind of dollars. So he probably made more on this movie than he made his entire career before then. But it is interesting. His son committed suicide shortly before this movie was made, and they were very hesitant to even approach him with the script because it's a movie about a father killing his son. But he just wanted to work, I guess, at the time, so they got lucky.
Yeah, I think he was retired at that point, but
yeah,
but he came back, and it might have been dealing with that kind of thing. Yes.
Charlton Heston turned it down, I know, and I think William Holden turned it down, and then William Holden actually ended up starring in the sequel. But this is a movie that didn't get made for a long time because a lot of studios turned it down. A lot of actors were not interested. But once Peck came on board, they got Lee Remick, and they got just a ton of good English actors pretty quickly.
Well, it's got
after
David
that.
Warner, and I think this
Correct,
is the only
yeah.
David Warner movie where I can remember him playing a good guy. He's always like the evil, the bad guy, and even in Titanic. But it was nice to see him as a guy that you could root for, which I really enjoyed his performance in it.
Was I the only one who felt sort of sorry for the mom who has? I mean, she has the worst kind of
No.
luck in the. Felt like
She's usually sympathetic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She has feelings of that her baby is evil and alien, and she doesn't know that it's the truth, so she kind of has just racked with that kind of guilt and depression from these feelings that she has for her own child, or what she believes to be her own child. And it all stems from that deal he makes with the devil in the first part of the movie, where the whole family is kind of cursed with that original sin of the first few minutes of the movie, where he tries to make the best of a horrible situation, and they just end up paying a horrible price for it.
Well, speaking of cursed, apparently this is one of the productions, like the Poltergeist, that has apparently got a sinister curse on it. A lot of the cast and crew have befallen sort of horrible fates. I think Gregory Peck and the screenwriter took separate planes to the UK, which is where the movie was filmed, and both planes were struck by lightning. Obviously, they lived, but it's pretty.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And
wow.
the producer Harvey Burnham also was in Rome. He also was just missed being struck by lightning.
Probably the devil didn't want to be misrepresented or something.
Yeah, that's largely Harvey Burnham has sold this kind of narrative of a curse, and I think it was a huge marketing thing at the time, and even still, and I think it's just a series of small coincidences that Harvey Burnham has kind of made a huge deal out of any little thing that happened.
Director Richard Donner was staying in a hotel that was bombed by the IRA.
Peck was almost killed by the IRA too.
Yeah, weird. But yeah, you're probably right. It's probably just some coincidences.
And let's not forget
for publicity. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Glenn, would you like to tell us about Carrie?
Yep, of course. Well, so the movie is based on the first published novel by Stephen King, and so considered by many as a horror classic. Some consider it a cult classic. But so the movie Carrie is about Carrie White, so a student of Bates High School. She is a social outcast, largely due to her religious zealot mother. So Carrie, during gym class, has her period while showering after gym, and is then pelted by all the girls within the class by her classmates. The girls are then caught by the gym teacher, Miss Collins, and girls are punished to 1 week of exhaustive athletic detention sessions. But one girl, Chris Hardington, refuses and is then banned from her high school prom, and then she swears vengeance on Carrie. But then Carrie is surprisingly invited to the prom by Tommy Ross after Tommy's girlfriend, Sue Snell, forces him as she is guilty that she took part in the bullying of Carrie. Chris then sets out her revenge in motion by rigging the election and getting Carrie elected as prom queen. Chris then dumps pig's blood on Carrie, witnessed by the entire class, all the staff, and this one event unlocks the potential of Carrie's telekinetic powers, which she uses to murder everyone at prom and her mother. And that's the synopsis of Carrie. So quite a lot of visual effects, a lot of good use of sound effects and sound mixing used within the movie. And I think that's what helps it become the classic that it is. I guess the directing and the editing, and especially the acting within the movie. So within the movie, you do have, of course, some iconic scenes. I guess if you do know anything about Carrie, you do have the prom scene, which everyone does know about, and it's been spoofed, parodies, and a lot of TV shows. Ones that I've seen recently would be Ugly Betty and 30 Rock as well. What does everyone else think about Carrie, or if they've watched it themselves?
The thing that I would say is that I think it's a very weird college where it's a very weird school where everyone is sort of like in their 30s, but it's it's like, I mean, John Travolta, he couldn't fool me, sadly, to believe that he was a high
Well,
school.
to be fair, that's pretty much every high school TV movie, anything. It's like that.
Yeah, of course.
Even the gym teacher is like younger than some of the students that are there, like the students within our gym class. The actress playing the gym teacher.
Well, the opening scene is so creepy because it's just kind of leering over all of these half-naked like high school girls.
I guess I'm curious. Has anyone read the book, and how closely does this follow the book? I guess I'm curious.
I read
So,
the book,
yeah.
and from what I recall, it sticks pretty close to it. I know at the end there was supposed to be like rocks raining down on the people and everything, and I don't know if I don't remember them showing that in the movie for like effects wise, but the whole destruction of the village and everything at the end was pretty spot on. I saw the movie and read the book about 10 years ago, so not too fresh.
That is one of the main differences between the book and the movie. So Carrie doesn't just stop at the high school; she does burn a lot of the town, the people living within the town as well, and destroying the town, which is covered more in the new movie, Carrie, the remake from last year.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a hard time with Carrie. I guess I found like the fire hose is murder implement kind of thing is just, I guess I found it kind of laughable. I mean, I thought the Piper Laurie mother character was so over the top that it kind of made everything else that was slightly, I don't know. I had a hard time with it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I watched the film twice overall, and I think I liked it actually better the second time because I think the fact that the bullying angle is actually pretty interesting because no one in Carrie's like immediate circle except the teacher gives her sort of self-confidence to just be herself, right? They all wanted to be something else, and in the end it turns out she is something else from them entirely. She's completely different from them in the fact that she has all these powers, and I guess that it's sort of like you kick the dog too much, at some point it's gonna bite.
Yeah. I think it's like The Omen. This is the first time I've seen this movie, and it is like considered a cult sort of horror classic, and I liked it. I liked it's sort of a small movie. It's like the centerpiece of the thing is the prom. It almost could be an episode of television. It sort of seems that kind of scale in terms of the drama that happens. But I liked it. I liked, as you mentioned, Glenn, the editing, sort of slow motion, the dreamlike quality to a lot of the scenes. I thought was effective, and I found Carrie pretty sympathetic as a villain, just in terms of monsters are sort of frightened and abused, and that's kind of how you see that process evolving in terms of her turning into a monster.
There's like maybe 4 or 5 people in the movie that have any real hand in abusing her, I would say.
Yeah, but it's like her paranoia that kind of or what her mother's told her that kind of makes her turn against everyone.
Yeah, so I don't find her sympathetic in the fact that she just kind of rains death on.
Well, yeah, at that point it's like.
Well, I think it's at least to some degree it's understandable because she's sort of given the illusion that she's being accepted. That this is not some kind of horrible joke or something that's going to blow up in her face, and in the end, it does, and it's sort of a confirmation of what she probably fears in that moment, and. She's sort of like I don't think that at that point she's even acting rationally. It's sort of like she just snaps and that's it.
No, I don't think she is. I think that's the point of it is that she does snap, but it's everything. The fact, like you said, that it comes on the heels of acceptance and finally belonging, makes her go completely over the end. And
starting to sort of open up, and I think we're meant to interpret that she sort of dreamed that everyone laughing at her.
Another big change from the book is just the description of Carrie and what she looks like. So in the book, in the movie, she's she does look like a bit of makeup, maybe straighten the hair. She looks good, and John Travolta says, "Oh, she's pretty," but in the book that would never happen. She's described as very fat. She's got like pimples all over, and like she's...
but at the same time, I think the frailty of the character is still, I mean, in the film at least, is still there because the actress herself looks like a person who would be very shy and very very withdrawn and all that, and I think that's why this at least from the physical description it still works even though it's the complete opposite of what is in the book.
This typically is not the kind of trope or style of horror that tends to get me. This is one of the ones I find easier to make light of or to just not be, scared by. Is the whole idea of fake teenagers getting into wacky situations. Well, it's not really wacky in this case, I suppose, but
That's a good point. I mean, do you guys consider this horror? Did you find it scary throughout?
I did not. I thought it was. I thought there was a lot of humor in there.
But for much of the movie, it feels like just a typical drama that you would watch on TV, and it's centered around Carrie, and you feel sympathetic towards her because she's been picked on by all these people. Then you do sometimes forget it is a horror movie until I guess the part where she does have the dinner scene with her mother, but then after that, it's not until I guess the prom scene when the horror starts to kick in again.
I mean, the situation is kind of horrible, at least to. I mean, the situation that the main character finds herself in is probably the worst. I mean, I wouldn't say that this is scary necessarily, but I have heard that people were freaked out at the ending, like the last thing, like
Yeah, the final jump scare where the
grave
head jumps out of the grave, definitely. But I
didn't understand, which I didn't understand while I was watching it, because up until that point there wasn't any indication that this was the sort of thing that she could do. But it's obviously also because it's in the mind of the other person.
There's a really good audiobook version where Sissy Spacek actually reads it, and it was released. Right. It wasn't originally, but a couple years ago they re-released it, and it was very, because she's got the she's from the movie, but she also does a really just amazing narration job on it.
Did she ever do anything after this movie of note?
Oh yeah,
she did.
I think she did.
I guess I haven't watched a lot of movies. Well, I do know of movies she's been in, but not movies that I've watched that she's been in. But like Coal Miner's Daughter, that was quite a big hit, and she won an Oscar for that. She was in this movie about set in the 1950s during the civil rights enactment. So it was starring Goldberg as well, along with Home. I think that's the only other movie I've watched her in.
Okay, because there was this urban legend that I found on IMDb that apparently in 1976 George Lucas and Brian De Palma held a joint audition for Carrie and another movie, Star Wars. And there was this long-running rumor that originally Sissy Spacek was cast as Princess Leia and Carrie Fisher as Carrie. But when Fisher refused to appear in the nude scenes and Spacek was willing to do them, they switched parts.
I think she also appeared in The Ring too, right? Didn't she? And JFK? I think
she was in JFK, yeah.
So I guess she's been doing other stuff, but I haven't seen her in anything major like recently.
The Coal Miner's Daughter was a huge movie at the time. I think it's still considered one of the best kind of music films ever made.
Okay, cool. I did have a question. Maybe you can answer it, Greg, since you've read the story. Why did the house explode at the end?
The book I remember, it's weird because she like destroys the town. She goes on this rampage, and then she basically like shuts her heart down, like she kills herself. But I think there was a gas main or something that's why she left it on.
Yeah, the car blows up too. It's all kind of crazy.
I don't even remember the movie. Her hands comes up to it like after they buried her. Is that what happens? I don't even remember.
Well, no, she kills her, or her mother's trying to stab her. And then she stabs her once in the back, and then Carrie manages to pin her with all these knives. And then she hugs her, and then the house collapses. So did Carrie just do that? Was it an act of suicide?
Oh, that's okay, right.
Yes. So,
in the book, she shuts her house. She hugs her heart down.
That's right. Within the book, I think it's another collapse of the. So it's similar to earlier in the book. She's a young girl, 6 years old, I think, and she has the rocks come down. Collapse the house, and that was something they were planning to do in the movie towards the end, but then they just decided because of the budget that they'd just have the house collapse without all the exploding rocks or have the house burned down.
Because when it happened, she seemed frightened, like she was trying to drag her mother to safety or something. And then there's this kind of pan up to, I think, a statue of like a saint, so we're maybe supposed to interpret that God destroyed the house. I don't know.
Yeah, why does Jesus have like crossbow bolts in
I think
him?
It's a saint. I don't think it's Jesus.
Oh, is it a saint? Okay, I thought it was Jesus.
The religion that she's trying to promote is sort of loosely based on Christianity, but not directly Christianity.
Is Christianity not in the public domain? Can they not use that? Is it copyrighted?
Who owns the rights to the Bible?
God, all trademarks and copyright. Yeah, but But the only thing is, I would like to know, is this is the story set in Maine by any chance? I don't remember.
It's set in the South.
The book is set in Maine, I believe.
I know that there's I mean, you can make a drinking game out of Stephen King tropes. Like if every time he sets the story in Maine, just take a shot. He seems to have a weird fetish with that place somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, the book was weird because he wrote it in '74, but it's set like in the near future, and it's written. There's the coroner's report. It plays like there's like newspaper clippings and articles. So it wasn't just a straightforward novel. It actually messed with the form a little bit, and for a first novel, it was kind of groundbreaking.
That's right. I think it's set during 1979 in the book. I think there's it's dated, like it has newspaper. There's so it has the date. Then there's the interview between Sue and the police detective, and it says 1979. I think at the time.
Yeah.
So do we think that Stephen King would have had his career if he hadn't had such a success with Carrie? Because I don't know exactly if that was sort of his big starting point.
He had written other things before, but they were not published things that he had written in college. So a lot of books that he's written as Richard Bachman were just old stories that he had written in college, and then it was finally published under the pseudonym. But so Carrie would be the first published novel. So 1974, and it was turns out it didn't really sell that well, like maybe 13,000 copies were sold. But then he didn't get a book deal, from what I've heard anyway, until the movie was optioned to be made into a movie. So that got him a bit more notice.
I think he definitely would have still had his career because, like, on the heels of this, he wrote The Stand and The Shining within the next couple of years, and it was those big three that really kind of set the ball rolling. And I mean, he's a force of nature. Even in by the early '80s, he was like the most popular author in America. So I don't think that even if he had a bad first couple novels, it would have changed much.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy to give up off a bad start. Does not seem that way.
No.
Didn't they also make a Carrie musical?
They did. That's right. It was quite famous as
Did they throw blood at the audience?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Like, just throw blood on stage.
Okay, we better move from the 70s to the 80s. Matthew, would you like to tell us about David Cronenberg's The Fly?
Oh, yes, I would. So The Fly is about this scientist who is a bit of a nerd called Seth Brundle, and he meets with a journalist called Veronica Quaife, played by Gina Davis. So he's played by Jeff Goldblum, which in a role that was sort of probably his best. And so they meet for an interview for the Particle magazine. So he takes her to where is his laboratory, and he shows her that he has created what he calls a telepods, so a teleporting machine. And he tries to show it to her by putting a baboon inside, and it comes out twisted on the other side, so he has to perfect it. And he doesn't know how to do it, and at some point he just tries to go through it himself. Yeah, there's a fly that gets inside, and when he comes out on the other side, like, without any problems. At least at the beginning, it seems like there are improvements. So like he goes to a bar, he arm wrestles a guy, he breaks his arm and all that stuff, and he's feeling stronger as well. And so Veronica notices these changes as well, and she gets worried because he exhibits really aggressive behavior and all that stuff. And yeah, so she contacts her ex-boyfriend, who is played by John Getz. And the character is named Stathis Borans. That also makes Brundle sort of jealous to some degree. I think, it's basically a love triangle, so to speak, which I find really funny because in the end it's sort of like, he's the creepy ex-boyfriend, but at the same time, in the end he turns out to be the heroic guy who saves the girl from the monster, right? So Brundle degenerates further, and he calls himself Brundlefly, and he shows Veronica sort of like the body parts that he's losing in his museum and all that. It's like he tries to record himself, and he tries to also improve himself. To sort of cure himself as well. But at some point, he just degenerates so much that he can't work properly anymore. So at some point, he just decides that he wants to merge with her in the telepod so that he gets some human DNA back, because then they're going to be together as a family, because she's expecting a baby or something, and she has nightmares about what the baby is going to look like. And that's the most horrible scene in the film, where she sort of gives birth to a larva in her dream. It's like, so in the end he sort of becomes fully a fly, and her ex-boyfriend shows up and he manages to shoot the machine, and so she gets out. Seth gets merged with parts of the machine, and so he sort of takes the gun and puts it to his head because he can't talk anymore, and so he has to express himself that way, and they euthanize him, so to speak. And that's the end of the film. So that's a really it's basically the best example of what a Cronenberg film is to me, because it's body horror, and that's what Cronenberg was mainly known for at the time, because he made films like Rabbit and The Brood and Videodrome and all that stuff. And it's actually, I would say that it's my favorite film of his. I mean, it's definitely a remake from the 60s version with Vincent Price, right? So I mean, but there it was sort of a head swap. So the man's head would be on the fly's body and so on. It's like, in the end, it's sort of, he's stuck in a web with a spider crawling towards him and stuff. It's sort of funny to a certain extent. But this one is actually really, really, the effects are pretty disgusting, but in a good way. And I guess it sort of talks about the unknown of our own bodies, right? I mean, at least how they develop. And it's talking about sickness of the body. At least we can talk about AIDS or cancers to a certain extent. But it's also, again, the point of man playing God and all that stuff, and using technology, and it goes too far. The best line from the film that I think is when Seth Brundle says, "I'm an insect who dreamed he was a man, and I loved it, but now the insect is awake, and the dream's over." Yeah, it's really. I mean, it also calls to like the writings of maybe Kafka. How is it called in English? The Metamorphosis. Yeah, where the guy suddenly wakes up one morning and discovers he's a big bug, right? So,
going back, sorry, Mitch, just going back to the sort of body horror. Yeah, the prosthetic makeup is incredible. I think it really captures the kind of diseased body, the degenerating body that Cronenberg is so fond of portraying. And you mentioned the possible readings of his condition being an analogy for cancer or age or some kind of disease. And I agree. I think that's an interesting reading in terms of Brundle dying this slow death and his girlfriend basically coming to terms with that and portraying the powerlessness of sort of terminal illness or being with someone who's terminally ill. Did anyone else have any thoughts on that or the makeup?
I just was struck that it's really a 3-character movie. As you said, it's a love triangle in a way, and there really is kind of a love story between Davis and Goldblum. But other than those 3 characters, there's really, other than the girl maybe picks up in the bar, there's not another character that's really in the movie at all. And it's just a very intimate story of these 3 people. And just a comment on the first 3 movies. Cars in these movies were so incredible, and I feel like going back and watching 70s and 80s movies, the automobiles were just amazing, and they're just so soulless now. But that's not anything about the other than the cars in Carrie.
He made Crash as well, right? So he made also Crash, right, which is about car accidents being sexual experiences and all that stuff.
This is 100 times better than Crash, in my opinion.
It's actually what I find also interesting is that at first it's like a benefit, right? It's like another. He sort of when he is more agile and he feels stronger and all that stuff. This is sort of I can maybe I could say it's like a drug, maybe, to a certain extent, like he's sort of an enhancer, a performance enhancer. But it's not like something he ingests. It's something that just the effects are actually pretty contradictory in a certain way. At least they reveal themselves to be really horrific, because I mean we watched like films like Spider-Man, where the guy gets bitten by a spider and he gets awesome powers, right? But it's not like he gets through a horrible transformation and becomes a giant spider, right? But it's something that you wouldn't normally want to think about, the sort of awful developments that go along with it. And also, I mean, it's also the unknown that I talked about at the beginning, right? When we talked about the different tropes that we either enjoy, because here it's really much more about, he himself has no idea what he's going to become, what he's going to be, and at some point he seems to view it as an adventure, right? At least sort of kind of a great experience to evolve.
I love the
well.
analogy, the Spider-Man analogy. I think that's very apt because we're so often presented with the superheroes mutating and it being a positive and it being an effect to strengthen them and to do good and to fight crime and all that. But I think Cronenberg's much more interested in mutation and the dysfunctions of the body and how socially isolating those sort of mutations can be.
I guess it holds up today because, first of all, the effects are amazing. In the sense that, I mean, at least when she rips his face off, I guess this is sort of when he has no jaw left, and as he's losing ears and teeth and so on. But I think it wouldn't work as well if it weren't for the performances, because there's always a bit of Jeff Goldblum in there when he's sort of like the and so the pause and all that stuff, right?
Well, I agree. I think that if there's ever been an argument for prosthetic or real effects, it's this film, and it reminds me a lot of Terminator as well, in terms of I guess the human skin being stripped away and revealing this kind of monster beneath. But yeah, it just wouldn't be the same with like CGI or something. It's so important to the performances that there's something physically revolting in front of them. Definitely.
Yeah. And the difference between this and a film like The Thing, for example, is that you really feel like this is a painful process.
Yeah, the tragedy of it. Yeah,
right? It's not.
I think like Carrie, it shows the dehumanizing process of starting with a sympathetic character and then watching them, I guess, lose their humanity and becoming monsters. Essentially, it's a horror movie from the monster's perspective. But just to hear from some other people, Zach or Greg, did you get a chance to watch the film?
I did, but the thing I particularly wanted to point out, based off that point you just made, about other movies like this being more enjoyable to watch, because the most obvious comparison I can think of is District 9, where it attempts to do the whole idea of a body deteriorating and kind of being otherized, and also having themes of racism and stuff like that. But it does end up devolving into the action film where it ends up being kind of a positive sort of. But I don't know. I do think that, like you say, this kind of this take on it that The Fly does is inherently a lot harder to deal with. Whereas I think maybe a film like that can still accomplish it to a degree without alienating you as a viewer in terms of your enjoyment.
Yeah, and I guess it's also something that shows that if you have a good director and a good vision behind something that, I mean, arguably at the beginning was not meant to be as complex as it ended up being, because it's just because it's a Cronenberg film. So Cronenberg obviously wanting to inject some sort of pathos into it. I guess that was. That helped the film a lot, because obviously just remaking the 1960s version wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be the same, because I mean I watched I know the 60s film is sort of similar in the sense, but it's still not necessarily the same thing. Like there's no evolution and there's no growth or how do you say that? At least weaken or deteriorate. Yeah, there's no deterioration. This one is much more, this is, it's going somewhere, but you don't know if you're going to like where you're going to go. And
I agree. I think this is the right way to make a remake, to take the sort of basic framework of a movie and then try and do something new with it, rather than just regurgitate the exact same script with different actors.
It is true that this movie with a different director and a different take on it could have been terrible, whereas I think it works very well in its current form. Though I may not enjoy watching it so much, that is the goal, and it's very successful in doing that. So yeah, it's I'm sure there's plenty of movies in this style that have failed miserably, whereas this one succeeds.
Greg, did you get a chance to watch the movie?
No, this was the only one of them that I didn't get a chance to watch. I apologize.
Glenn, did you have any thoughts?
Coincidence?
Why?
Yeah, I can't
Insects,
imagine why.
bugs. Sorry, Glenn.
I was I did enjoy it. I tried to watch it on Friday night, but then fell asleep. But then thought, better watch this. So I watched it on the Saturday morning, and yeah, it surprised me how much I did enjoy the movie. I think that the makeup within the movie is just phenomenal, and I just love the transformation that he has. So you can see throughout the movie how much his body is decaying. Duncan, do you remember when we were talking about the Terminator, when we did that audio commentary for it? There was towards the end, it did remind me of, well, I was mentioning that, well, in the Terminator commentary that we did, I mentioned The Outer Limits, and there was an episode of that called The Man Who Was Never Born. So his style reminded me of like the character from that episode, just the makeup, the style of the way he looked, some of the dialogue as well. So I really enjoyed the movie, and some of the moments in it are certainly horrifying. It's quite gruesome as well.
I mean, this is a film that is timeless because I guess it doesn't feel like it's set in a specific time because of, first of all, the sci-fi element of the telepod, right?
I would just disagree that the haircuts and clothes
of course, yeah.
and cars is very
They're coming back.
Yeah.
They're coming back.
mid-'80s to me.
Sure. No, but I mean, the sci-fi element sort of takes it and makes it into a parallel universe, and that's why I'm saying, like, at least this is sort of the ideas behind it. They can't actually date, which is why I guess people still enjoy watching the film today.
I think it holds up very well. I mean, the Seth Smollett aside, but everything else is great.
But did Gina Davis do? I mean, I know she did other films after this, but this is sort of the one that people most remember her from. I suspect,
Thelma
right?
and Louise.
What?
That's the big one.
Oh yeah, Thelma. Yeah, sorry, but yeah, it's one of those. I mean, those two are probably the ones that people most know her from, because I haven't been able to see a lot of performances from her in other things. So I don't know. Maybe I just haven't been looking properly. But yeah, I know that Jeff Goldblum has been like hanging out with dinosaurs and stuff. But yeah.
Well, I guess it should be said that they were in a long-term relationship, so they made a bunch of movies together, and they have great on-screen chemistry because they were, I don't know if they were married at the time but they were certainly in a long-term relationship for years.
I felt it was just refreshing that the fact that the option of abortion was discussed during the movie, because when she does realise that she was pregnant, I just rolled my eyes thinking, oh, here we go. It won't even discuss the option of abortion, but that's one of the first things that they do eventually. So she does go to his apartment. She does aim to tell him that she's pregnant, but she just decides not to at that point, and then she says, just take me to a clinic or wherever you can. I want it out right away, right this second.
Well, there was speaking of the pregnancy, there was I think a final scene to the film that was eventually cut, and I think Gina Davis's character is having all of these dreams about giving birth to fly larvae and all that, and that's why she contemplates an abortion. But at the end of the film, there was supposed to be a scene where she has a dream about giving birth to a butterfly or something. But I watched it on YouTube, and it's really bad and cheesy, and so I'm glad they cut it.
I can understand. But then they made the horrible sequel anyway.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, abortion shows up in The Omen too, which I thought even 10 years earlier than this movie.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, Roe versus Wade, I think, was 72 or 74. So the fact that abortion was in The Omen, I thought, I guess it's kind of patriarchal how it's dealt with, that she needs his permission to do it, but it's still something that is in The Omen as well.
And here it's more like a decision that she herself has to make for herself, right? And so it's probably also a film that is very very progressive in its mindset about the female characters, which you can't say about a lot of horror films, because most of the time in lesser films they are there to be, the victims, or the damsels in distress that you have to
Well,
to
I
save
think
and so on.
I think what's interesting is a lot of horror movies have female protagonists, which is kind of cool. They are certainly victimized by like a male aggressor, and there's all that sort of the male gaze and voyeurism and objectification, but at the center is a female sort of trying to survive, which is kind of interesting. Any more to say on The Fly?
I did want to discuss teleportation. So within the movie, that's one of the central themes that's the device it has. And I was trying to think of other movies that I had heard of that had centered around teleportation. I couldn't really think of any. Does anyone have any ideas of other teleportation movies?
Can't think of any. It didn't really seem to be that big of a point in the film. It was just kind of a plot device to get the actual main plot started.
Yeah.
Mutation.
But
Jumper.
But I
That's
guess-
a great movie.
but I guess it's also
Oh, Jumper, the classic.
but it's also
Obviously,
something
Greg would like that movie.
Aw.
What does that
Oh,
mean?
Nothing.
But I guess the thing
There's
is
no
that
book
it's about going somewhere, right? It's going from place A to place B, and maybe that's also something to do with the narrative of the film. Like he's gonna go somewhere, like at least on a in an abstract sense, right? He's gonna go from his human state to an insect state. It's like you're sort of the idea of progress. He's at least going to evolve into something else. So he's going to maybe progress or regress. We don't know, and that's the beauty of it.
It could also
You know-
just be the more general sort of idea of meddling with nature and science, meddling where it shouldn't go, and the cost of that. And there are no sort of shortcuts in terms of physics and biology. There will always be a kind of evolutionary cost to that kind of daring.
I did think of one other teleportation movie.
Yes?
I don't know, we've seen Logan's Run with Michael York, where it's not a
Yeah,
main thing in the
what?
movie, but
No.
it starts off where you can like browse people. It's kind of like, I guess, Tinder before, where you'd browse people you want to have sex with, and then if you like them, they'd pop into your room through the machine.
Of course, that
like
would be
browse through people.
the first application of teleportation. Sex.
Yeah, of course, it's used for sex. But I was just trying to think of any other.
What else would you use it for?
Yeah.
Making
There's a lot of in
mistakes.
fiction, there's plenty of stories and novels, but not many movies.
Yeah.
If teleportation was an actual thing, or like there was some development in the future that made it possible, I was sort of thinking, do you think that like the government or like the powers that we would allow it to happen, or allow it to be like in widespread use? Because it would destroy a lot of things.
Well, it's I guess it's different from cloning, so there isn't necessarily like a moral kind of.
You think the oil companies
Gray
would
area.
let the government ever come up with something? Because if that happens, there'd be no need for shipping or oil or
Yeah.
transportation.
It's
If,
true.
like,
Well, there's
Only-
the whole thing with this phasing in Star Trek where when you teleport, you're not the same person. You technically die and are new.
So I don't know if there's anything else to say about The Fly other than it's probably. I hope it's not going to be remade at some point, because it's already a remake of something, and I wouldn't like to see someone else try to mimic it.
Well, again, it depends. If they have a unique vision to bring to
Yeah.
it, then you can't really deny it, because that's what Cronenberg did. He had a unique take on
Sure.
it. He did it.
Right now, I'll need to take my cue to leave.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
no worries.
Quite
Thanks
late at
for
night.
coming on, Glenn.
Take it easy,
No.
Glenn.
Glenn doesn't want the serial killers to get him.
You run, Glenn. Run.
Your
Tell them
fault.
what you saw here.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No problem.
See you, Glenn.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so The Silence of the Lambs is a 1991 American thriller adapted from a Thomas Harris novel by the same name. In the film, a young FBI trainee named Clarice Starling, played by Jodie Foster, is tasked by her superiors to conduct an interview with Dr. Hannibal Lecter, played by Anthony Hopkins, a brilliant psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer being held in a prison for the criminally insane. Meanwhile, another serial killer nicknamed Buffalo Bill, played by Ted Levine, has begun kidnapping young women and skinning their corpses. Starling continues to talk with Lecter, believing his insights into psychopathic behavior might be useful in apprehending Bill, but Lecter only agrees to help her if she talks to him about her personal thoughts and feelings. I think what's frightening about Silence of the Lambs is its reoccurring depictions of enclosure and being trapped. Characters find themselves in crowded elevators, in grim funeral homes, in delivery vans, in abandoned storage garages, in darkened basements, in prison cells, in cages, and at the bottom of wells. The deranged killer Buffalo Bill even feels trapped in his own wretched skin and dreams of one day shedding it like a cocoon and taking flight as a brilliant butterfly. It's a very disturbing film, a very graphic film, not necessarily for its depictions of violence. We're usually only privy to the aftermath of various crimes, but more for the implications of these acts, the terrifying pathology behind the violence. The characters are fascinating on their own, but even more so when they're in dialogue with one another. The scenes between Starling and Lecter are particularly entrancing, both for their writing and the chemistry of the performers. Their first encounter is like a descent into hell, as Starling makes her way from the mundane office ground floor of a Baltimore psychiatric prison and into a practically medieval dungeon, its walls awash with red neon light. Demme's use of extreme close-ups give us a genuine sense of the hidden fears and desires at work on Hopkins and Foster's faces. The cinematography is also about us moving closer to Lecter, physically and emotionally. We are forced to look evil in the eyes, as it were, and not flinch away. Like Starling, we are made vulnerable by our own fascination with these monsters. Lecter is a walking contradiction of refined intellect, cruel wit, menacing playfulness, and remorseless savagery. The danger for Starling is not a physical danger, but a psychological one. In her efforts to understand the workings of an evil mind and save Bill's most recent victim, she is forced to open herself up to be studied by evil. The Silence of the Lambs is one of only 3 horror films ever to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, the other being The Exorcist and Jaws, and it is the only one to actually win the award. Did everyone else get a chance to see this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's
yes,
one of my
I saw it twice.
No, it's one of my favorite movies. It's one of the best book to movies adaptations that I can think of, and it's sort of the book that sent me down Thomas Harris's writing, because I've read all of his books and he's one of my favorite authors.
Yeah, I've read Red Dragon, but I haven't. I only started Silence of the Lambs, but I enjoyed what I read, and I agree he's a really interesting writer, very suspenseful, thrilling writing.
He's I've actually met him a couple times. He lived near the bookstore I work at, and he is the nicest, most soft-spoken Southern gentleman. And it's so weird because he came in one day and he was looking over this like anatomy book of 18th century like medical texts, and he's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And we're just looking at him like, the guy who wrote Silence of the Lambs is looking at a medical text in our
That's
bookstore.
so cool.
He's like, "I'll
Coming
take
up
that."
with new ideas for like dissecting
Yeah,
bodies.
he's always thinking, but he's super nice, and he's just nothing like any of his characters. But it was kind of surreal to have that moment.
That's awesome.
It's just too bad that they forced him to write the prequel book to the Hannibal series. I don't know. There was no book.
Always with the prequels.
Yeah,
it was still fun. It gave the backstory, and it was, the fact that the movie came out before the book doesn't bother me too much, or right around the same time.
Yeah,
but it was just fun to get in Lecter's head and find out where
it doesn't take away anything from the original movies.
Just to comment on what you said in your summary about people being trapped, I think if we take the image of lambs being trapped inside a closed area, it's like sort of they're all meant to be innocent, but when we look at it in the film, at least most of the people that are being trapped are not. So I guess it's a nice juxtaposition.
Well, most of the examples are Starling, and of course the girl who gets kidnapped. So I would say pretty innocent. I mean, obviously Lecter is evil, but
it's actually this is actually I don't know that Jodie Foster. Do you think that this is Jodie Foster's best role? Because I think she has. She has made some other films, but not ones that people maybe think of when they think of Jodie. When they think Jodie Foster, they think Silence of the Lambs probably first, right? It's
that I've seen. I think it's her best performance. Yeah,
it's up there. I really loved Contact. Also, it's one of the few movies that I like better than the book, and I thought she was really great in Contact also.
And
I find her accent kind of distracting in Silence of the Lambs, but I'm probably the only person that does.
Well, I mean, Lecter
that
does
was-
make a comment sort of at the beginning. He says like that accent you've tried so desperately to shed. So maybe that's
Oh yeah, of course.
the kind
It's
of
a- it's a
sort of
very-
supposed to be a bad accent.
So-
For me, it's a very affected accent that she
Sure.
has in this film.
Other question: Brian Cox or Anthony Hopkins? All right.
Well, I
so
mean,
it's
that's the question. The Silence of the Lambs might be a sequel to a film from the 80s called Manhunter, which is a Michael Mann film,
yeah.
which was
This-
adapted from
adaptation
Red
of
Dragon,
Yeah.
the original movie. But most people seem to suggest that it's not, that Manhunter was a flop, and the people who made Silence of the Lambs didn't really make any obvious connections in the film or in marketing to associate it with Manhunter. That it's a
Yeah, well, Jack Graham is really the only connection aside from Lecter to Red Dragon, and he's really just in Silence of the Lambs to be Clarice's boss. And
sure.
he I don't even know if he references the that serial killer at any point in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, there's no references to the Red Dragon
Yeah.
case, but I liked Manhunter for what it was. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Silence of the Lambs. It's a much colder, more sort of police procedural film. There isn't any of that sort of gothic horror, I think, that Silence of the Lambs has. But I liked Cox's performance. It's very it's nowhere near as I don't know, playful or as charismatic. It's much more empty and cold, but it was interesting.
I
When
think
we
Mads
compare-
Mikkelsen is more scary looking than Anthony Hopkins, but like you say, well, obviously we're comparing different things, but Anthony Hopkins is very animated and really plays the role of Hannibal like really well.
I'm convinced Mads Mikkelsen is a serial killer, so I don't know how anyone on the show
Yeah.
doesn't realize
Well,
who
he plays
he is.
I guess the only thing is that I would probably have to say that I prefer Brian Cox to the other ones.
Get out of here.
No, because I think it's not like he doesn't steal the film. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
much smaller.
the film itself doesn't rely on Hannibal Lecter like the other ones do. In the sense that it's not about him. He's sort of
Yeah,
just
but when you
there to
when you
provide
think on it,
information, right? And
Lecter's only on the screen for like 10 minutes maybe in the whole movie. It's not it's his presence, but he's not the main character in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
no,
And I
of
think
course, but
that's-
it's like he became the icon for the film. Anthony Hopkins, like, I mean, I enjoyed him a lot in the film. It's just that I think that he maybe overshadowed the rest of the film a bit too much, probably because he's not actively like involved in the search for Buffalo Bill because he doesn't care in the end. It's just like he wants to get information about her. You know, he wants to get to know her.
I think he's absolutely involved in the search for Buffalo Bill. He's giving
Yeah.
her bits and pieces of information
course.
in return for personal information from her, and I think
No, that's
ultimately
it.
the way
Yes.
she catches him is through Lecter's advice.
But that's not what he cares about. I mean, he just, I mean, in the end, he doesn't think that it's important. It's important because he can.
Sure, yeah.
he-
It's a
but
means to an
once
end. He's not emotionally
withdraws-
invested in whether they catch him. It's more about
Yeah.
getting his claws into Starling. But I think ultimately he does play a
I-
big role in the main central storyline.
I guess the only problem that I would have with the film is that it sort of presents most of this. I mean, at least what people associate with serial killers is like the mastermind who is sort of like untouchable and who operates from within a sort of a solidified fortress, right? A prison cell, without actually having to leave the cell. And so this sort of thing it's like when you look at real life cases of serial killers, they're actually fairly dull and uninteresting people, right? They are people who have issues with probably rage issues and all that stuff, but here it's sort of like it's
The ones who got
theatrical
caught.
in the right way, I think, but at the same time it's not necessarily an accurate portrayal probably of
Well, I think
how
Buffalo
people-
Bill is kind of
yeah,
a classic
that's
serial
what I mean.
killer. I mean, he's
Yeah,
just kind of a loser,
Yeah,
whereas
and
Hannibal is obviously kind of exceptional and shown as such. But I think Buffalo Bill is your classic kind of more realistic serial killer.
it's I don't know, he seems like I mean the actor I don't know that I have seen him in a lot of stuff apart from this, but
He's
Ted
been in a lot
Levine.
of stuff, but he's never. I mean, he was in
He's-
Monk. He played
Yeah, he's the captain.
chief in Monk for years.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
in Heat. Few
He
other
always plays like
Michael
a
Mann
cop
films.
or a government guy.
Yeah.
okay.
But Ed Gein was a serial killer that actually did use the skin and body parts of his victims. So I think that's something.
But I guess he was more of a grave robber, wasn't he, as well? I mean, he just most of the stuff that was found in Ian's house was from graves he robbed, I think,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Buffalo Bill is a combination of a few serial killers. Ed
Yeah.
Gein, who skinned victims, Ted Bundy, who would use a similar
Pretend to be
technique
injured, right?
of getting women, to help him
Yeah.
into his van, and another guy called Gary Hednick, who kept women kidnapped in a pit in his basement.
Oh yeah.
So it's a combination of. He's a more sort of textbook psychopath serial killer, whereas Lecter is much more this cinematic or this theatrical creation of the author. It's a larger than life, almost sort of vampire character that you can't really classify. It's very gothic. It's not really a sort of something you can understand in police procedural criminology terms.
What I like about Sons of the Lambs is that it's about a mystery that you actually know the answer to pretty quickly, and at least the film shows it to you. But then you have the escape of Hannibal Lecter and all that stuff, which I still find like when he's in the cell, like listening to music while the guy is trying to get away. It's like that's just really it's having fun with the material, and it's mastered the material enough, I guess, to the point that it can sort of allow itself to it feels like it flows really well. There are no scenes that feel forced necessarily in the way that it's presented. So I guess it's.
I agree completely with that. Something about this film is, I don't know, just digestible in a way that in some other horror films I don't think are. I have a much easier time watching this, and I think that, like you say, that's mostly just because it flows really well, and there's sort of a nice variety in the emotional tones there, and it's also just very interesting to watch as a sort of psychological thing, to watch these interactions between these characters. I find that to be the most interesting part. Just really good actors playing off each other.
It's also got a lot of like, not tropes, but just it's very quotable. I mean, a lot of horror movies are quotable in a bad way, but I mean, like the fava beans and like the whole lotion in the basket. Like at least once a week at work, like we keep our DVDs in these we're like passing the basket, and someone will go, "It puts it in the basket," something like that.
Yeah, that's the first thing I heard of this movie, and I had to watch after.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, or else it gets the hose. So we always work that in. But it's super dark, but there's some levity. Not in the film, but it's become lighter, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of films do enter the sort of pop culture, and then the lines become funny or cliche. But I think Silence of the Lambs somehow avoids that, because when you actually watch the film, those lines are still as sort of scary and terrifying as they're supposed to be. So I think it retains the sort of seriousness that it was intended to have. There were criticisms made against the film regarding its treatment of women, particularly the notion that a film essentially about the evisceration and objectification of women would be awarded Best Picture by the Academy Awards. And in a similar vein, members of the transsexual community have protested the film because of its characterization of Buffalo Bill, whose violence some have interpreted as stemming from his sexuality. That's not really how I read it, but did you guys have any thoughts on the potential misogyny or transphobia in the film?
I think Jodie Foster challenges the Scott Glenn character, right, about how she's being treated. And he kind of plays it off that he's kind of treating her badly just because these hick cops then will open up and allow him to do his job, where they would naturally be resistant to like federal law enforcement coming in. But she kind of challenges on him and says, that they take their lead from the way you treat me, and if you're going to treat me that way, they're going to think it's all right to treat me that way. And I think she kind of puts him in his place. So I think misogyny is there in the film, but I think it's making a statement about it. I don't think it's pro-misogynist.
Yeah, it's not propping it up in any kind of way.
Yeah, I think that's the point. It's definitely there. The misogyny and the sexism is in the film, but the film is not in itself misogynistic. It's taking things from Clarice Starling's perspective, and a lot of the film is literally taken from her perspective. It's a point of view shot from her as she looks around at all these men in various places, FBI trainees, her bosses, local police officers, members of the psychiatric prison, just staring at her, and there is this sort of expression of contempt there that she bristles against.
I guess it's maybe the idea that the people who accuse the film of being misogynistic is that she sort of has to sort of learn, at least from Hannibal and from her boss and all these things. She has to sort of learn from them, but at the same time, I think the film pretty much makes the case that she solves the case by herself, right? So it's I mean, she puts the things together by her on her own, and she's a nuanced character in the sense that she's vulnerable when she needs to be vulnerable, and she's strong when she needs to be strong, right? So it's a very nuanced performance and a very nuanced character. So I guess the only thing that I could see maybe is that, you know, it's still about women being in peril, you know. But I know that there was something about Buffalo Bill being like having like Nazi stuff in his room, and, you know, the fact that he was a transsexual being sort of maybe used as a way to stereotype transsexuals and homosexuals, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think that Lecter's, I guess, prognosis of Buffalo Bill is that he is not a transsexual, but rather he is a person who is so tormented in himself that he wants to transform into something else. And that in his mind, the furthest that he can get away from himself is to become a woman. But you know, of course, he's rejected by all the major sex reassignment clinics because he is so psychologically disturbed. And that seems to be the director's reading of the character as well, Jonathan Demme, although he has since added that there is a worrying absence of positive gay characters in movies.
Yeah, and so I mean, so do we know the theme of transformation? It also has something to do with Starling herself, right? She has to also change to become someone who is basically in charge of her own life, right? Of her own career in this sense. Like, she has to prove herself, but she can only prove herself if she sort of makes these changes within herself as well, right? So
yeah, I would say the moth or butterfly imagery is very indicative of her having to kind of transform during the course of the movie.
Also, bugs. So Greg, I thought that Greg might maybe not like it as much, maybe.
But, yeah, but all the bugs in this are dead.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, when she comes into his house, it's full.
Oh yeah.
Oh, except for that, yeah, the ending.
That's
right.
I find.
I have to live in the world, guys. I have to be able to get along. So.
Yeah, that final confrontation with Bill is really scary when she enters the house and is going down all the levels. Again, it's this idea, this sort of descent into hell, and when she sees the woman in the bathtub all sort of melted, and then the lights go out.
Oh, that's
and then you get one of the few point of view shots that isn't from Starling. It's from Buffalo Bill, and he's sort of staring at her in the darkness,
touches her,
terrified and afraid, and just bumbling around, and it's so scary. But in a weird way, we're put in the position of the predator. We're sort of in his skin in that moment, and we're stalking his prey, and it's very nauseating and confronting in terms of filmmaking.
I think it's from his perspective because she is what he wants to be, right? She is what he wants to change into, but he can't do it, and so he has to hesitate. So he hesitates, and then she sort of manages to shoot him. But I think that's what he does, right? He reaches out to touch her, and he can't, so he just.
Yeah, he reaches out, and then he pulls out the gun and comes back the hammer.
His pistol, and
she hears the hammer, and she fires. Yeah,
I like Catherine a lot. The woman that gets kidnapped. I think she's kind of badass too.
Yeah.
So
that must have been a horrible acting job. Even though it's a movie, you still have to sit in that and scream and muster up those feelings of terror. That must have been horrible.
Yeah, that's pretty. It's a pretty claustrophobic film.
I think what's amazing about Lecter is how much he's able to dominate anyone standing outside his cell. You know, technically he's the one in the cage, but he is so with words and just by smelling and just by staring at them and, you know, whispering closer, closer, he's just able to completely undo them. His power of words and understanding of the mind is so just overwhelming to people who come in contact with him.
Yeah. To be honest, the first time I watched the film, I didn't realize at first that when he escapes the cell and Swatcher's faces, I didn't really realize that's what he was going to do. I mean, I just felt like, okay, he's going to probably try to escape via the elevator or something. I mean, at least, you know, he's going to be on the elevator, and then it turns out he wasn't. And yeah, this sort of.
I think that's the point. He's one step ahead of everyone, including the audience.
Yeah, it's also weird because in that scene he reveals that he's actually not different from Buffalo Bill because he still does the same things. It's just he has a bit more sophistication, but
Well, he has more
he's
control and he has more patience. Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah, but it still doesn't change that he's just doing the same the base things, like murdering people in a vicious manner. Like he's not killing them in a nice way. He's not necessarily, he's not like his
I'd like
sophistication
to see how
stuff
that's
there.
done.
That's a
Right.
pretty harsh review of Lecter's methods.
No, he would probably
Yeah.
he would probably not see it as very very courteous. So I would probably not, I would probably be on on the meal at some point. I
Yeah,
guess
it's a
that's what
moment
I'm
in the
saying.
film where we're jolted back into reality and we're reminded what we're actually, being sort of seduced by and being fascinated by. Like Starling, we're being drawn into this character and all his very interesting charisma, but ultimately that's the moment where it's like, no, this guy is a monster with zero empathy and he'll cut you up as soon as look at you, given the chance.
Yeah. But we needed that, I think, as well. Because just talking about it is not enough. You have to show what he's doing, because otherwise it's just a lot of build up with no payoff. And this was a payoff. I don't know exactly why he put the other guy into the moth position there, because it's not his own thing, right? It's the other guy. So was that to just leave a clue to the police? I mean, to solve the case, or
I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
just to rattle them, get them to bring in the SWAT, basically, bring in the cavalry, and no one's actually looking at the body on the floor. They're searching everywhere but that room. But well, speaking of serial killers, the film does kind of play on this public fascination with serial killers, which is a sort of very real and present thing in society or in culture or in media. Did you guys have any thoughts on that at all?
I think that's why I think I prefer the films to the TV show in some aspects, because the TV show makes it seem like these people, you have like 500 serial killers, doing their stuff in the same area in the same week. It's like
Dexter.
so many. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I think the film portrays the hunt for a person like that in a more realistic fashion, because it takes time, and sometimes these cases don't get solved because these people are probably not committing these acts all at the same time or in a short amount of time, but over a long period. So it's probably not very easy to track them, and so it's probably a much more palatable way of presenting it. The other thing is that these people are actually not that common. They're not. I mean, they don't make up the majority of crimes. These hardcore cases, they draw attention because they are exceptional, because they are outside of what you normally expect. So I guess that's why people are so fascinated by them, because they can't believe, oh my God, Jeffrey Dahmer and all that, and Ted Bundy, these people, they are, they're an exception to the norm. And I just think that, like, it's not like a Batman villain where you have, everyone has their own gimmick, and it's like the murder of the week, like who did it, like the Penguin or the Riddler. No, it's this is actually, yeah, much more closer to what a real manhunt would look like, I guess. And that's why I think the TV show sometimes is a bit, yeah, they do the monster of the week stuff a bit too much, I guess. That's why.
Yeah, I studied criminal justice for 4 years, and I haven't, for those 4 years, I didn't read a mystery book, and I didn't watch any Law and Order, because once you start studying, you find out it's quite different than what's actually presented on television. So yeah.
You mean a court case doesn't take half an hour to get there?
No, and arraignments are not exciting at
fucking
all.
enough.
Arraignments. Yeah. All right, cool. Greg, would you like to tell us about the film Ravenous?
Yes, well, I just finished watching it twice while everyone else was talking, so it's fresh in my head. Ravenous kind of was overshadowed at the time. I don't really remember hearing about it in the theaters. I just saw it on TV one day. But it came out in 1999, and it basically, I did a quick summary of it here. Guy Pearce stars as Captain John Boyd, veteran of the Mexican-American War, who was promoted after an act of cowardice turned him into an unlikely hero. While playing dead under a pile of corpses, the blood of the dead men leaked into his mouth and gave him this superhuman strength. He then stormed the enemy fort, captured the high command, and when he tells his story to his commanders, they decide to promote him for valor instead of having him shot for cowardice. He's sent to a remote fort in California where he becomes part of this ragtag group of individuals, which includes Jeffrey Jones as the commander, David Arquette as the cook, Neil McDonough as a soldier, along with some others. Shortly after his arrival, Robert Carlyle shows up. He's this near-dead, traveler dying of frostbite. They warm him up, and he tells them this horrible story that he was part of this Donner Party group of travelers who were heading to California, but they got caught up in the storm, and they took shelter in a cave. And this crazy army colonel named Colonel Ives killed them and ate them one by one, and Calhoun managed to escape, and he found the fort. They end up going to the fort. They decide to try to get this guy and track him down. So Calhoun leads them back to the cave, and while Boyd and another soldier inside, Calhoun basically turns on everyone else, kills them one by one, and it turns out that he is Colonel Ives. And it leads on this crazy chase where Neil McDonough is killed, and Guy Pearce's character is mortally wounded, and his only choice is basically to eat Neil McDonough to survive and then to get back to the fort, which he does. And the rest of the movie is basically where their new colonel shows up to replace Jeffrey Jones, and it's Robert Carlyle as Colonel Ives, and Guy Pearce is trying to convince everybody that, hey, this is the guy that just killed everyone. No one takes him seriously, and the last half hour of the movie is just a lot of people being murdered and them both ending up dead inside a bear trap. Spoiler alert.
Oh, wow. We actually have really good transitions here because we went from Hannibal to cannibals, and
A rhyming transition, very nice.
I have to admit, I didn't get a chance to watch this movie. Sorry, Greg. But did
That's
anyone
fine.
else get a chance to see it? Thomas, Zach?
I've
I
seen it,
didn't,
yes.
so-
It's a genre that I very much like, which I would call like weird war. I read a lot of weird war comics, which is like military stuff with horror or supernatural elements to it. And I like the time setting. Mexican-American War is hugely underserved and kind of,
Yeah, there's not much out there.
yeah, and kind of the United States taking possession of the West, California, and the Southwest and stuff. It is very interesting, and I like the Western Passage. So I like probably 2/3 of this movie a lot, but I think it kind of falls apart at the end, in my opinion.
Well, the ending becomes your typical, hero trying to kill the villain. But the
Yeah,
movie, like you said, I like movies that kind of blend genres. And I watched one of the featurettes on the DVD, and it's Robert Carlyle talking about that you can't really pigeonhole the movie. It's he calls it's a horror film, it's a psychological thriller, it's a western, and it's a gothic piece. It's got a lot going on, and that's I like Army of Darkness, where it's a horror movie, but it's also a time travel movie, and it's a medieval story,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's very darkly satirical, and they're poking fun
there's a lot
at
of comedy in
lot.
here.
And the movie opens with this black screen and this quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, and you're like, oh, you're in here we go, and then it flashes this 2-line quote of "Eat me, anonymous." So you're like, okay, this is gonna be fun. And anytime there's something serious, it's balanced out by this very poking fun at the genre, or just an actual something funny happening on screen. And the way the characters are introduced, like he shows up to the fort and the colonel's like, all right, we've got our soldier, and then it flashes to Neil McDonough like naked in a stream screaming, and then we've got our cook Cleves, and it's David Arquette smoking peyote with the Indian guy. And the trailer is so misleading because it was geared as a horror movie, and that's where I don't think it was well received, because it's not really a straight horror movie, and if you took it as that, you'd kind of be disappointed. But David Arquette is in the movie for maybe 10 minutes, and he's in like half the trailer, so I guess this is made at the height of David Arquette's popularity.
He does have the best line in the movie, I think, though. He was licking me or whatever.
No, that's Jeremy Davies.
Oh, that was the other crime.
You ruined my favorite line. I was gonna
Sorry.
quote it.
I thought probably the line was something like "pleased to meet you" with
Oh, there's a lot of fun.
MEAT.
I mean, it's like
But, I don't know.
what you eat, and eat to live, don't live to eat, and there's this really haunting scene where like Jeffrey Jones he's murdered. You think he's dead, and then he comes back, and he's like he's been turned into like how Dracula always has Renfield, his familiar, and so
Oh, yeah.
he's doing all his dirty work for him, and he says, it's lonely being a cannibal. It's tough to make friends, and that's why they have their grand plan is to kill a select few people that travel through this fort so they can live forever. And that's kind of where it lost you, Thomas. I assume where they're
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
plan.
First of
And
all,
I
I
get
love
that.
Jeffrey Jones, and I liked him a lot in the first half, where he was kind of a bumbling Jeffrey Jones kind of character, but he also had a very good heart, and he was interested in doing his job. I really don't understand this fort. There's 6 people there, and 3 of them are high-ranking
No,
officers.
the rest of them are at some
They
point,
just came
right?
with it. He said that they just came with the place.
Yeah.
But it's
Oh,
got some
yeah.
people that became very, Neil McDonough and Jeremy Davies went on to, very successful careers after this. And Jeremy Davies plays this, he basically plays Private Upham from Saving Private Ryan, except it's 1847, where he's very quiet, he mumbles, and he's putting hymns together. But he does have the best line of the movie, where he wakes up one night after being wounded, and Robert Carlyle's on top of him, and he's like, "He was licking me." And that's the line that they've had in all the trailers. It shows him screaming, "He was licking me."
You can cut out the part where I ruined that.
That's all right. It's fine.
And he's in Constantine. I didn't know where I recognized him from, but that's
Yeah, I saw that too.
So-
And he's known from Lost. That's probably where his big break came, was as the crazy doctor in Lost.
So is the idea sort of that, I guess, under extreme circumstances, we're all sort of capable of turning into monsters or cannibals or flesh eaters?
No, the basic thing is that
Yeah.
if you eat someone, you get their strength and you become almost superhuman. Well, not
okay.
quite superhuman,
Sweet.
but you can because the main guy had tuberculosis, and then he met this Indian who told him a story of the Wendigo, which would take on the soul of the person after it ate them. So he's like, well, I ate him, and he tasted bad, but my tuberculosis went away, and he's insane. And he's almost kind of like a Hannibal Lecter type character, in that he's very level-headed about what he does.
So it's
And
sort
the
of,
Wendigo,
it's a bit like a vampire mythology, I guess, as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it played. There's a
Wendigo-
good quote. Oh, go ahead.
the Wendigo is also, the Wendigo seems to also be connected to the Hannibal TV series, right? Because there's this image in the TV show where they have this weird creature with the antlers showing up, and it's apparently it's a Wendigo, sort of this cannibalistic American Indian idea, sort of the like a vampire. Yeah, I think it's sort of
Yeah,
the
well,
idea.
it plays with the genre because you're introduced to the idea of the Wendigo as one of the scouts at the fort is an Indian, a Native American, and he has this piece of animal hide, and it's got the Wendigo drawn eating somebody, and Jeffrey Jones is like, well, this is preposterous. Nobody does that, and then he flips it over. He's like, Sunday. He's like, oh yeah, Christians do this every Sunday by eating the body of Christ. And it's almost slapstick at points, but it's Roger Ebert actually, he really gave it a good review. He gave it 3 stars, and he said Ravenous is clever in the way that it avoids most of the cliches of the vampire movie by using cannibalism, and most of the cliches of the cannibal movie by using vampirism. It serves both dishes with new sauces, so that's kind of goes along with what we were saying.
Cool.
Oh wow! Is it then that idea that if they are cannibals, sort of because that's also a common myth, right? It's like when you sort of ingest someone, then you sort of take on sort of aspects of their personality or their physicality and all that stuff. So that's actually something that some cultures that have cannibalism in their history really believed. So I guess this has some real historical research behind it as well, right?
Culturally, at least. I mean, the Donner Party is a famous west. Is this party heading west that was lost in the mountains and no one survived, and it's believed that they resorted to cannibalism to survive. And there's the Raft of the Medusa is a famous painting by Gericault that actually is based on a historical event where it's a really tragic story because this ship sank 20 miles offshore, but because of the currents they couldn't get to shore, and they just basically went insane and ate each other. But this cannibalism always pops up, and Alive is one of probably the most famous movie and book that tackles it.
So would you say this is closer to Shaun of the Dead than Dawn of the Dead, in the sense that it's more of a horror comedy, maybe?
It's I don't know, Thomas. You might. It's never laugh out loud funny, really. It's chuckle, I don't know. It's dark humor. It's
Black
not
comedy.
Shaun of the Dead is. Yeah, it's black comedy. Shaun of the Dead is a straightforward horror comedy.
Yeah, I guess I wish it played it a little, I don't know, a little lighter on the supernatural eating people to gain their strength, and just and
It
this
was-
kind of conspiracy by the end where there's 3 or 4 people that they want Guy Pearce to join them for reasons I never quite understood.
Yeah, that's that they don't need him. It's just that he's
Yeah.
the hero of the story.
Yeah, and I liked it. I liked his character, that he was kind of a coward. That reminded me of, like, L.A. Confidential. Like, he got promoted for something he really shouldn't have been promoted for. And I liked his character.
It's sort of like the Red Badge of Courage, the story of
Yeah.
the guy who's runs away from his first battle and is eventually promoted, and raised up, and then finds his courage by the end and becomes the hero of the story. That's basically what he does. But it's one of those
But did
movies
he
that
actually Did he actually take the Mexican command? I thought he just kind of came out and killed like 1 or 2 guys, and then the Americans kind of had.
Well, they say you single-handedly captured the enemy command, and they did that weird flashback, but it was so low budget that it was like, there's 4
Yeah.
Mexicans and you got 3 of them.
Yeah, I thought he just kind of got lucky that he came out of the pile of corpses at the same time the Americans kind of reattacked the Mexican position, and it just
That
looked
could've
like
been
he
it,
did
but-
more than he actually did.
I think
But,
you're meant to believe that, like, he woke up from that because he was like high on the bloodlust, whatever, or the blood, literally the
I
blood.
thought he was just
from
kind of
drink.
sick of blood running
Yeah.
into his mouth. But
Enough already.
and then the movie opens right on those kind of rare steaks, and he's kind of sick at
The director is Antonia Bird, and I'd never seen her other stuff, but she's was open about talking about that she was a vegetarian, and anytime they show food in the movie, it's almost to the point of, like, it's grotesque because it's like 50 armies, just digging into these steaks, or like a fresh killed, and it's sort of her saying there, don't eat meat, or that you eat meat and bad shit happens. But
That's
it's not
pretty cool.
super overt about that. But all the scenes of the meat.
You think
almost
it's
sickening to
vegetarian
watch.
propaganda?
Yeah.
All
It's a slippery slope. First we're eating cows, then we're eating people.
And it's got a really memorable score. Just it's a real minimalist score, but there's like a motif that shows up about 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, and it's really haunting. And every now and then it'll just pop into my head, and it'll be stuck there for a couple of days. And it combines like Native American music with just really basic guitars, and it's a really great score.
Did was this late 90s, 98?
99, I believe. Yeah.
Did it make much of an impression at the box office, or was it kind of a flop?
I don't think so. It got kind of a couple good reviews. I'm sorry, I did not check the actual box office info, but we can pause that and do it, or add it in post.
I
$2
think.
million in the box office for a $12 million budget, so
Oh, not good.
not too good.
Yeah, gross.
It says it grossed
That's-
there we go.
2.1 million.
Usually,
Oh
I
jeez.
think-
Well, I don't think it was released. It couldn't have possibly been released widely with that, right?
for a movie to be considered successful, it has to make back twice its budget. Yeah,
Can't
I
even
mean,
make back 20% of its budget.
sometimes it also, as you said, it would depend on the marketing to some degree, probably, because people, as you said, they probably weren't expecting to seeing a film like
yeah,
this.
I can't even imagine.
So-
Like, it's impossible for a movie to make $2 million these days.
Well, I guess if you have a Uwe Boll film, they don't are they that successful? I don't know.
Aren't they all
it's like-
just giant tax schemes?
Yeah,
Fronts
probably.
for the mob.
That's the secret in the sauce in which we're going to cook. I don't know, some pesky cowboys probably, but this seems like actually a pretty neat idea. It's just as from what I understand, the last third of the film is a bit, it sounds a bit wacky to be. I mean,
Well, apparently I was
that's-
just Googling, and it actually is loosely based on Alfred Packer, who was one of the only survivors of the Donner Party, who admitted to cannibalism and caused quite a fuss in the 1840s, 1870s. So it looks like it is a little historically based, at least.
A
He
little.
was also known as the big-headed cannibal.
To the point. Apart from the licking scene, was there like a favorite scene or moment in the film?
Well, just the end, the epic battle. It's like this 10-minute scene of them stabbing each other and cutting off various body parts. But
And they can't
At the
die
end,
because
he-
they're
he-
magical.
well, he leads him to this giant bear trap, and Guy Pearce causes it to clamp onto both of them, and Robert Carlyle goes, "That was sneaky." That's of course sort of like his line, and they use it in the trailer a couple times. And he also says, you better hope you die first, because I'm sure as hell gonna eat you.
I'm sad I missed this
sounds
one. I
fun.
think this might be my favorite of all of them so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I'd highly recommend checking it out. For me, the sequence where Jeffrey Jones leads and it's a long sequence, but leads them from the fort to the cave. I think that's the highlight for me. That whole
that whole scene is great. That whole, because it's the guy who you think is the victim turns out to be, and it's the way he turns. He starts going insane. He's like conducting this music that only he can hear. It's really creepy. And when they realize what's going on, I like movies that even though you rewatch over and over again, you want it to turn out differently. And this is one of those movies that at that point, like if they only would have made it back 10 seconds earlier, they would have got him. And you want it to happen, but at the same time, it's not going to happen.
I guess I wish that there's a flashback when he's relating his tale about what happened to his original party. I wish when they shot that flashback that they had shown him in character that he says he is, because they don't show him or the colonel.
Yeah, you always see like the back of a head or him running away.
Where I wish, to me, it's pretty obvious at that point. That they didn't show him that he is the colonel. But that whole sequence then when he is going crazy outside the cave, that is pretty terrifying actually.
Yeah.
That he's gonna get the upper hand on these people because they've sent Neil McDonough inside the cave, so everyone else is kind of no match for him really.
I agree.
So I would recommend checking it out if you have Netflix.
It's a fun movie. It's not an Oscar winner, but it's a fun movie, and it
sounds interesting.
The time period, there's I love the Civil War, and I can't really think of any movies that are set during the Mexican, or that have like battle scenes of the Mexican American War. No one even knows about that war.
Would you say this movie is one of the better examples of representing the American Western cultural tradition, you think? Yes, no?
It's a Western in the sense that it's out west and it's set in a fort, but there's no gunfights. There's no, the two Indians in the movie actually are kind of heroic, and they're the good guys. There's
I think the
only bad guys
Americans are very well represented in the movie.
And it's got a strong female Native American as basically she's kind of the hero of the story. She's the only real survivor in a sense, also.
Cool. All right, Zach. I think you're probably the last one. Would you like to talk about 28 Days Later?
Sure, let's do this. I feel like, I've put in like 3 minutes of talking so far. Hopefully we can add a bit more here. I'll keep my summary short though. So 28 Days Later for me is the quintessential kind of zombie movie in the style of the sort of modern trend that I'd say is probably iconified best by a show like The Walking Dead. And I think that inherently for me is part of the appeal of this, which is that we get to see these very poignant interactions between characters as opposed to the longer form that you see in The Walking Dead. And I just love the idea of generally speaking, the post-apocalypse interaction of characters and just how they react to the circumstance. I love that. That's why I enjoy this movie so much, and why I would rate it not just as a favorite horror film, but as a favorite film in general. So again, set in, I'd say probably around the time it was filmed, like early 2000s England. And what's going on is that there's this group of scientists that are experimenting on a virus called Rage, and some animal liberation activists break in and set them free, setting loose the virus, and havoc ensues. Then we skip ahead 28 days later to our protagonist Jim, who wakes up from a coma in a hospital in London. And he walks out and finds himself in the desolated London, which, I love this part of the movie so much, just seeing the emptiness. I think, that's the name of the movie. But yeah, I love this part of the movie so much, just the music and the exploration of London. I love just the way it lingers there. And then we end up in the church where he has his first encounter with these rage virus people that are essentially can spread it by just having any kind of interaction with blood or saliva. And so he runs for his life. He meets up with a pair of characters. It's Selena. What's the other guy's name? Mark, yes. And they end up going to his house because he's obviously distraught at this circumstance, and he finds out his parents killed themselves so as to avoid being infected, and he has that whole thing, and they're attacked, and they continue the progression of avoiding the zombies, and end up meeting up with a man named Frank and his daughter Hannah, up in one of the abandoned buildings and hide out there for a while and continue the journey with eventually Frank is killed after a drop of blood does it comes from the bird or from the thing the bird is on. I never really
I think there's a corpse up there and the bird is kind of eating it.
Yeah. And he kind of like shakes it and the blood goes down and infects him and it gets in his eye, which is another thing I like how about this kind of zombie is how easily the infection can be transmitted just having a little bit of blood go into your eye and that's it.
That's one of the best shots of the movie too, is to see the drop falling right into his open eye.
Yeah, it really raises the tension, I feel. Frank, he's my favorite character for sure. Yeah. and so it sucks when he dies, and that again raises the stakes a lot. That he's gone, and of course Hannah no longer has her father, and then they're saved by a group of soldiers led by a guy named Major Henry West, who is played by Christopher Eccleston, and he kind of takes them in to his little compound where he sort of set himself up as the sort of Lord of the Flies kind of guy who's got his it devolves from there. Eventually, Jim, the main character, finds out that Henry West has plans to use Hannah and Selena as basically prostitutes to repopulate the human life. And he's basically insane. And Jim rebels against this and is going to be executed, but he escapes and then comes back and goes on a rampage and saves Selena and Hannah and kills everyone. He is shot but survives, and then in the process he finds out while he's in prison that the virus is contained to Great Britain, the island itself. So there's hope out there that they could be saved, and because of that, they make plans to signal fighter jets that are passing by to rescue them, and they are eventually rescued at the end. So there you go.
I may be wrong, but this seems like the beginning of that kind of zombie resurgence in popular culture. I think this is 2002.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, it seems that way to me based on what I've seen, and I think that a lot of stuff like The Walking Dead is very much derivative of this material.
Well, The Walking Dead and this were made concurrently. The Walking Dead was written before this came out.
No, I don't think it was a couple years later. This is Walking Dead was 2003, right?
Yeah, but it was written.
At least
that's what Kirkman claims, that he didn't rip off the coming out of a coma thing. That it was all that he. And I think there's evidence of this, that he had written that before it takes a while for a comic.
Okay. But yeah, that's a good point. They both start very similarly.
Yeah, almost identically.
You wake up and the world's completely changed.
And it's a good way to, you don't have to actually deal with the zombie apocalypse. You kind of start after it and kind of tell your story there. Whereas
that is interesting that a lot of zombie fiction I've seen does kind of want to skip over that first moment of, like complete chaos and anarchy and things falling apart.
Because that's not actually the interesting stuff, right?
I was going to say, that's what zombie stuff's about. Zombie stuff is about the people and its commentary on that.
Yeah, the people that are settled into the post-apocalypse.
You want to worry about an apocalypse? Drop a nuke on a city or something.
The zombies are almost like sort of irrelevant in terms of character development. They're more like just this threat, this pressure cooker to make all of these other elements of society change and transform and fall apart.
Yeah, and I really like that. That's why I enjoy this movie so much, is that it's so focused on humanity and the characters themselves and how they interact as opposed to the zombies as a force. Obviously, the zombies are driving their action, but it's more ancillary than I think that it tends to be in other fiction.
Yeah, it's the idea that society is collapsed and humanity is on the brink of death. That's the real driving force. But there is sort of a controversy around this film as to whether they're actually zombies or they're just people that are infected with rage virus, or whether that counts as a true zombie film.
Well, I guess the question is, what
technically, I don't
makes a
think
zombie?
They're dead.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't care.
I don't care.
Yeah, I was just joking earlier about that. I don't really care. It's a zombie movie as far as I'm concerned. I was just being obnoxious.
Although there is one change, that they actually run really fast. When you think of the zombie, you think of the shuffling mob, and there's not like one zombie isn't actually that dangerous.
Yeah,
it's more the
and I think
out of zombies.
And I think it could be also a reaction to the fact that to traditionally zombies, they are slow, and that's I think you can make it compelling even with that limitation. It's just that to me, zombie films, they are not that interesting anymore because it's not necessarily the popular opinion, but I just feel like it's like vampire films in the 90s and 80s, like where you have an oversaturation of stuff, and sometimes it needs to quiet down a little, and then you have to do it again. But this feels like much. This is one of the better ones.
Well, I love zombie movies, and I think the fact that they don't change doesn't really bother me. I think what does change is the society in which the zombies appear. Like, I think George Romero is kind of the classic sort of grandfather of zombie movies, and it's interesting to watch his series of zombie movies, how they each take place in a different decade, and interesting to see the culture that they absorb and what they sort of say about 1960s Night of the Living Dead. Obviously has interesting race relations. Its protagonist is an African American. I don't know, some people have read it dealing with the gruesomeness and the violence of the Vietnam War sort of coming back and reappearing as guilt in terms of America, and this Dawn of the Dead kind of dealing with consumerism, and I guess it's all set in a mall. I haven't actually seen Day of the Dead, but I think the fourth one was all about totalitarianism and maybe allusions to Bush, whatever. I mean, this is just speculation, but I like that idea of
I'm not saying
each like decade has its own zombie or its own idea of what the zombie is and what it means and what it threatens.
Yeah, I just wish that I mean they obviously they lend themselves to social commentary, but at the same time I wish that we would have at least more films with other stuff in it. I mean, I don't necessarily want to watch horror films that are only zombie films, for instance, but it feels to me, at least at this point, that the majority of films that we have, I mean, in horror films that are made today, seem to be, geared in that direction, like zombie films. And to some extent, I feel
are there that many zombie movies?
That's it. I don't think that. I mean, for me, the thing now is like, I mean, post-apocalypse and dystopia seems to be the big thing right now, just with on the heels of Hunger Games and all that, and The Giver, and now The Maze Runner, and especially in the bookstore, 8 out of every 10 young adult books is dystopia, and there's a couple zombie books, but there's actually, I don't think there's that many.
I mean, there's
we
The
were
Walking
putting
Dead
together like zombie literature, and there's like 6 books we had. We had like World War Z.
No, but when you look at World War Z and stuff like that, it's these kinds of films where they at least they draw a big crowd, because obviously the book of World War Z was really good, and I mean it's just, to me, I wish that we would explore other things as well, not just do different things with the same device. That's always appreciated, but I just wish that could probably use other kinds of mythology and other kinds of myths and make new stories that involve different kinds of ideas.
I think mythology is about retelling the same stories and I guess adding new ideas to it. But I think I just like the zombies because I don't know, I consider them sort of unique in terms of the monster mythologies. They're not a single creature that has to be brought down. They're everywhere. They're the crowd. They're us, basically.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like them, is because they're. I mean, yes, there's always a social commentary talking about what's it reflecting in society at the time. But for me, the part that always got me, and even from the Dawn of the Dead and a lot of the zombie books, is that there's very few fictional scenarios where you would be forced to kill someone that you loved a minute ago or an hour ago or a day ago, and that's I've actually thought of it, like, I don't know if, I mean, it's so, The Walking Dead, the TV show, has done it better, where they show the consequences of how it might drive you crazy to constantly just kill people nonchalantly, and anytime Rick's group encounter a new person and they see how cold they are about it, and it's just a thing, you're like, oh, that's right, this isn't normal. And I don't know if I would be able to kill my brother if he was attacking. It's silly to think of this as a real thing, but I do think of that, and good books and good movies make you think of how you would do in that situation. And I always pride myself that I think I'd survive, but part of me is I'd be the first guy dead because I wouldn't be able to kill anybody.
I'd commit suicide.
I'd just tap out.
I mean,
I would
you're right.
live in that world.
It just completely upends all the established moral laws. It's just wipes the slate clean, and it's everyone for themselves. And a big part of zombie movies, especially Walking Dead, is trying to maintain this code of honor, try and maintain this code that we're not animals, we're not dehumans, we do have.
And changing them back. Is there a way to change them back? That's the
big question. Can we go back to what we were, or do we try and create a new society?
I wish we
I'm
just talked
just
about
saying,
zombies for 2 hours.
Definitely.
I'm just saying that to me, it feels like at least the fact that it's like everyone for themselves, and that sort of this mentality, it sort of to me indicates at least that in Hollywood there's a distrust of, of big crowds. Like at least when you look at people demonstrating in the streets and stuff, it's always like, oh, they might turn violent, and people, I mean, at least
Well, I mean, they
at
do.
least it's like the big scary mass that's going to swallow your individuality and all that. It seems to me to promote like ideas that feel a bit too individualistic and selfish in a certain way. Maybe that's what I don't like, because it feels like it is afraid of people living in large communities and living for their communities. Instead, in zombie movies, you always have to just survive for yourself.
Well,
And
I think you could
screw the
make an
next
argument
guy.
that a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction and zombie fiction actually does bring back the notion of community, whereas in our modern world it is lost to the degree that we may see the interdependence and reliance upon others that we see in zombies. And I think that is one of the conflicts in a lot of zombie fiction that I do find interesting is the conflict between whether or not you'd be better on your own and not have to make that hard choice you mentioned, Greg, of having to potentially kill a friend or someone you love or a family member, where if it's safer to go alone or if it's safer to be among a group that has your back. I like that. I like that dichotomy a lot.
Yeah, it's a
But
good point. We are a very sort of individualistic kind of people. We do have this fear or this aversion to big crowds or big groups or the idea of the community. It's more about us, the individual. What can we get for ourselves? So it's kind of an ironic kind of dichotomy, this idea that when the zombies appear, we're afraid of the crowds, we're afraid of the hive mentality, the irrationality of crowds, but at the same time, it's also about people coming together and trying to rebuild community.
Yeah,
I think
in 28 Days Later, that's the thing with Frank, right? He's waiting for someone to come along so he can kind of share the burden of his daughter, where he's afraid to leave with just her. But when Cillian Murphy's character, Jim and Selena come along, he's like, well, if something happens to me now, she won't be alone. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing.
And ultimately, it comes true, that fact that
Exactly, yeah.
they do end up saving her, where she would have been pretty screwed if not.
I guess just to me, it always felt a bit, I mean, the fact that we didn't have a zombie film yet where someone decides, for instance, to become part of, the zombies, because obviously it's it's probably a different way of living for them. It's a different kind of, because they're different beings at this point. And I would rather like to see, someone sort of say, well, what is that kind of life like?
Well,
Maybe
in
they're
World War Z,
I
in
don't know.
the book, I don't think they did it in the movie, but in World War Z, there was a section of people that didn't want to kill the living dead because they considered the fact that they only ate, that they didn't eat animals, that they were actually vegetarians, or that they weren't destroying the earth. So they're like, hey, let's do their thing. And of course they were shouted down, but there was a section of people that were like, they had a name, the Greenies, I forget, but they were like, hey, they're not causing any trouble, in their warped way of thinking. They're actually cleaning the earth of the real problem, which is humanity.
That reminds me of something a conservative friend of mine said, that of something like, of course it's the animal rights activists that start the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, I don't know.
Tree
That
huggers.
sounds a bit far-fetched.
It's doomed us all.
Yeah, it seems like that facility should have been better security.
Yeah,
got,
they seem like very extremist, like terrorist level guys, so maybe that's why.
Another thing that I might have to usually, not with this film, but in other films, I usually don't like necessarily, is the fact that this sort of invites the justification for authoritarian force by what remains of the governments necessarily that are there. Especially I think if you watch it 28 weeks later, right? Where sort of the military gets involved in all that stuff.
Well, actually, I've not seen the
obviously
sequel because I have no desire to. I'm really pleased with how this movie acts on its own. I know it's supposed to be decent, but I just have no
it's
interest.
quite a different movie, but I would
much bigger
it's
scale.
got Robert Carlyle, right? Again,
Yeah,
another
he shows up.
actor, Jeremy Renner and stuff. But I think it's an inferior film, but I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah. Well, I think zombie movies are usually pretty ambivalent about totalitarian kind of takeovers or, takeovers of the remnants of humanity. They're either shown to be crazy, egomaniacal, rapist, army, military people, or at the least there's a sense that, I don't know, it's not the best way of doing things, but it's the only way of doing things.
That's a
But it
reflection of
asks that
history, though,
question,
that times
sure.
like that, times like those, they push those people to the surface. And you
Yeah.
need, not that you need strong people to survive, but through chaos, that's when this kind of stuff happens.
Well, it's the upending of it's this kind of leveling out of society. It's like there's no more rules, there's no more prejudices, there's no more discriminations. Anyone can sort of try and climb up to the top.
Yeah, is that security worth going against chaos, or
That's kind of why the governor in Walking Dead is such an interesting character because, oh god, I've forgotten the protagonist's names. The sheriff. He remembers him. Yeah, Rick. Rick knew him as a town drunk, and now he's like taken over an entire town. The idea that once you change all the rules, people can create entirely new identities.
Yeah.
Did I miss that? Did I miss? Was that Rick knew him before?
Yeah, they have like a parlay at one point, and Rick makes a comment about him being there. Yeah, I knew.
Oh, that must
have
have just been in the TV show. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Like, that would have changed a lot of stuff.
Oh, really? Oh, is that different from the comics? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I haven't read the comics, so I'm not knowledgeable about that. The only
Judging
thing
by how much
I
you love zombies, Barrick, I keep calling you Barrick. I'm sorry, Matthew. I'm surprised that you haven't read the comics.
It is.
No, there's a section in World War Z that's actually set in Germany. It's a German soldier talking about his time during when everything was falling to pieces, and I'd be interested to see how you. It's just like a short story length part of it, but it's all about him recounting how Germany, because each country handles it differently, and that's one of my favorite sections. Is that interview with that guy.
I haven't read the book, so I just watched the film with Brad Pitt, so I wasn't.
Yeah,
but
don't judge the book by that travesty.
It's weird to sort of to think about it because I love the idea of the zombie movie, but I don't think I've actually seen that many apart from the Ramiro films and 28 Days Later. But I love it in video games as a mechanic. I think I've played so many zombie video games, and it's just such a cool
Nazi zombies.
A cool mechanic to like crowd control zombies and conserve.
Oh
them.
yeah,
it's fun as hell.
But thing is that with zombies you don't that's something else. It's like with zombies you don't need to worry about guilt of shooting them because they're not alive anyway. But yeah, that's probably why I'm not I see the ideas behind it probably too much sometimes, so that's why I can't enjoy it as much. But at least now, because I didn't know that Cillian Murphy was in a horror movie before. I just knew him from Batman Begins and from The Winter Takes the Barley and all that stuff, and Solaris. Yes.
Oh, yeah, he is Scarecrow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Which I find like it's really weird that he hasn't. That he hasn't been in more blockbusters or something, because
he did Red Eye. Red Eye was pretty big. That he played like a serial killer on a plane. Remember that?
Yeah. This one at least he's unapologetically sympathetic, I think. So at least most of it. I don't know. It seems like he's. Do you think he's kind of a wuss at the beginning? Like, I don't know.
I don't know. He develops very quickly from what I guess. I don't know. He's not a wuss, but he's obviously, very terrified by the circumstances. But I think that he adapts quicker than most people would. So that is the thing. A question I'd be curious about though is, do you find him sympathetic? The whole massacre. Do you find that part believable? Obviously, he's saving his friends, and it's for a good cause. But killing people in that manner, is that?
That's not what I meant. I mean.
No, I'm just curious about what people think about that.
He's the most
unsympathetic
guy.
It's been a while since I've seen the film, but I'm pretty sure it was justified. What they were going to do, they're pretty evil dudes. They were just going to keep doing it to other passerbys. So kill them.
Yeah.
I think there is a degree of moral grayness there, though, like a fair bit, and that's what I like about it, is that it's not clear if it was the right thing to do or not. Obviously, the guy in charge was a bad person, and the other ones were kind of, a lot of them were messed up in their own way, but still, subjecting them to that degree of, just slaughter and completely destroying their sanctuary is still...
Do you mean in terms of him releasing the zombie?
Yeah, the zombie and him killing people too, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more just he didn't really have any other options. There weren't any other tools for him to use. So yeah, okay, that's a pretty brutal way to go, but it was either that or accept his fate, I think.
Yeah, he could. He doesn't kill, like, there's, I think, at least one soldier that's, like, cowering in the corner. He's like, I don't have any more ammunition. He just leaves them. He doesn't go out and actively kill people that aren't trying to either hunt or rape basically his family.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't see any grayness there for me. He's not sadistically murdering.
I mean,
It was a means to an end, basically. Yeah, he wasn't malicious.
That's fair, but I think there's a part of it is some of that aspect in zombie literature, and that idea of letting loose and like giving into the madness a little bit. I think
sure,
my biggest problem is he gets the one guy's gun and then he runs a bayonet through him. And then he just leaves the gun in the guy. It's like, why would you not take the assault rifle with you?
Why did
He's
Sam
too quick. He can't savor those little emotions, I guess.
the thing is that
there's a sergeant character in there who stands up to the captain or whatever his rank is, and the rest of them, and he says, basically this is illegal. You can't do this stuff. And they take that sergeant and Jim out, and they're gonna shoot him in a ditch. So I feel
There's
like
also the character that reveals that the major is not he knows that there are people out there that could save them.
Yeah.
So that he's just like completely psychotic. He wants his own little private island.
Yeah. So it's only Britain, is it? So the rest of the world there's a potential for the world to come in and save them. So I mean, yeah. They could have just held out for a little longer. I mean, 28 days.
The rest of the world is full of assholes in this film because they don't do anything.
Yeah, that's the justification is that like the human race is on the brink and they need to start repopulating it. But if it's only Britain, then that doesn't make any sense.
It's only Britain.
This guy just wants. He's
a humanitarian crisis, right?
He's just a rapist in waiting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is he wants to own his own little sort of mini empire, and he's completely insane. So
Lord of the Flies is a good analogy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe taking things down intellectual peg a bit. I do have to say I like the fast zombies because I find the action set pieces with them more interesting. I don't know. I love the way this film is shot with that. Some of it can get a little annoying, like the shaky cam. I know people don't like that so much, but I think it works.
Well, you definitely need to watch 28 Weeks Later. Then I would just say if you're interested in fast zombie action scenes.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I enjoy them, but I like that this movie doesn't make too liberal use of it. You can make an argument that it really slows down halfway through and there's not a lot going on, but I do like that the shock, the fighting is kind of not the primary thing going on.
Yeah, there's a real intensity to the action scenes, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, the story is about the people. It's not really about the zombies, or the infected, or however you want to call them.
I forget. At any point in the movie, do they say you have to shoot him in the head, or do you just have to shoot him anywhere and they go down?
They don't specify it, but I think they're
not zombie.
Well, they're just people,
they're correct. They're just infected people.
But they're like hyped up on like adrenaline kind of thing, so they're harder to bring down. They're like kind of resistant to pain, I assume. So there's probably it's not you can't just kill them like you could kill a normal person.
Yeah.
So what do you think of the alternative endings? Do you think some of them are better than the one that they went with in the end, or?
I actually don't know anything about them.
The alternative ending is just that he died, isn't it?
Yeah, there's one where there's a rescue without Jim, basically, and so it's like, I think there are different kinds of endings. Like one where he dies at the hospital, and one where there's a radical alternative ending, I think, as well. Oh,
what? He just wakes up in the hospital and everything's fine.
Yeah, hospital dream, and that's
I would
stupid.
like that. Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't have minded if Jim died and it was just Hannah and Selena that were saved at the end. I guess I don't think I would have minded that at all.
Yeah, I don't mind it either, but I do like, I don't know, I like the happy ending a little bit. I mean, obviously there's stuff that went down. It's not entirely happy. I wouldn't call it melancholy, but I do like the emotional upturn at the end. And it's underscored well by the way it's shot with the giant rolling green planes.
And there's no doubt if it was a box office success. I checked, it had a £5 million budget and made £53 million. So that's a success in anyone's book.
So do we want to talk some survival zombie? Some of that?
Yeah.
How we go about it?
Oh, no, we can completely skip that. I'm happy to go to bed.
We've been going for
It's getting almost to 4 hours.
We'll save that for an official guys' night out, I guess.
Okay.
No worries.
Sure.
All right. Would you guys like to go around just to finish off and talk a bit about some of the runner-up favorite horror movies. Zach, would you like to start?
Well, I mean, like I say, I don't have too much of a zombie movie, canon to go off of, and I do tend to favor the more light ones, the ones that are funnier. So another zombie movie I obviously love is Zombieland. That's a fun one. That's a completely different take, but I enjoy it all the same.
For sure, yeah. Greg?
Well, actually, I put this one out of my mind because it affected me so deeply. But Fire in the Sky, I don't know if anyone else has seen that. It was an early '90s like alien abduction movie,
Yeah.
and it scared me so. I saw it way too young. In the theaters, I must have been 10, and I forced my parents to leave. I don't know what they were doing taking me to see that movie, but it's got some of the grossest flash scenes of this guy being abducted by aliens and experiments, and then he wakes up like on the alien ship. It scared the crap out of me. But that's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And just other really good horror movies that I like. The Mist, which is the adaptation of a Stephen King short story from like 2007 with Thomas Jane. That's just one of the best. It's post-apocalyptic. It's horror. It's got everything. And Army of Darkness, which is just one of my favorite movies. And it's silly, but it's horror. It's got everything.
Cool. Thomas, what are some of your runners-up?
Yeah, we mentioned quite a few of them. John Carpenter's The Thing, Alien, Jaws, American Werewolf in London would all be on my list, but I'd highly recommend everyone see Room 237, which is a documentary about The Shining, but it's you don't even really need to.
It's about all the
Correct.
conspiracy theories about what the film means, and
And I think for
yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you agree with most of them? Because I watched that and I was like, I don't see that. I don't get
No,
that.
well, I
it's
think-
wrong.
No, that's the point. It's kind
yeah.
of for a Song of Ice and Fire fan. I think it's required viewing. I mean, it's about authorial intent and kind of crackpot theories and kind of how things take a life of their own. Artwork can kind of become a virus and just skew crazy.
Well, the theories are definitely interesting and creepy in the way they're presented, but they're
Yeah.
very far out there. But I think in a way, the more interesting thing is this dissection of, I don't know, obsession and people obsessing
Fandom and
over works of
Yeah,
art.
you find
Yeah.
out it's actually lazy set designers like forgetting to put the sticker back on the wall. It's like, oh crap.
Well, I mean, it's a good point to bring up a Song of Ice and Fire because the things they put together and piece together, and the ideas they come up with are so out there from like a sort of outsider point of view. Probably seems like that to some people looking in on a Song of Ice and Fire, maybe.
And Kubrick was certainly obsessive, so there's reasonable stuff to be mined there, but it does get insane at some point.
He did obsess over set design, so there's probably a few bits and pieces, definitely. Matthew?
Yeah, my runner-ups were probably going to be The Devil's Backbone by Guillermo del Toro, because it's about ghosts and the pain and memories being like very important to the present, because it's also, he talked about it being like an accompanying piece to Pan's Labyrinth, because it's also set in the Spanish Civil War. Then there was going to be Angel Heart, because it's one of the rare films that with Mickey Rourke that I like. I mean, except for The Wrestler, which is also really awesome. I mean, because it also has De Niro in a very, very different kind of role. He's very calm. He doesn't like go off into big speeches or into big, he doesn't emote much. He's very, very subdued, very collected and calm, and that's I like when actors try something different. Then there was probably Ken Russell's The Devils, which is about a 16th century French town. It's hard to explain. It's basically it's about the sort of the corruption of the church, and the I don't know, the difference between spirituality and religious doctrine. It's sort of like, I don't know, it was really controversial at the time because they had lots of nudity shots and lots of violence in it as well.
I just googled what time it is in New York. Sorry, Greg.
That's all right.
Really
I'm
sorry
off
to
tomorrow.
drag this out.
No, it's fine.
I'll
Never
just
complain about talking about zombies.
Oh, good. I'll just mention a couple of mine. I got to echo The Shining. Stanley Kubrick film, very surreal haunted house movie. Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero, like the original zombie movie. Blair Witch Project, weird sort of mockumentary horror film from the late 90s. Alien, of course. We actually did a fan commentary for Alien late last year, if anyone's interested in that. And finally,
listen to that one.
And finally, The Descent from 2005, which is one of the most claustrophobic, scary movies you've ever seen. If you're claustrophobic, do not watch that movie. You'll go into a conniption fit or something.
It's like what should have happened in The Hobbit with the orcs, right? It's like
that's
that's the scene of The Hobbit where they are taken by the goblins, basically.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps everything up. Covered a lot of movies, a lot of discussion. Thank you for listening to our horror movie roundtable. If you've enjoyed this podcast or any other podcast, then please leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you guys for coming on. Thank you. Thank you,
thanks.
Glenn, obviously.
Thanks,
Thomas, Greg, Zach, and Machu. Yep, this has been the Vassals of Kingsgrave. Happy Halloween, and we'll catch you later.
Happy Halloween.
Bye, guys.